الرحمن الرحيم رضوانك يا ودود والودود سبحانك يا حكيم الحكيم سلطانك يا عزيز العزيز رضوانك يا ودود الودود سبحانك يا حكيم الحكيم سلطانك العزيز العزيز رضوانك يا ودود الودود برهانك يا حكيم الحكيم سلطانك يا عزيز العزيز بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم سبحان من يراني ويسمع كلامي ويعلم مكاني ويرزقني ولا ينساني سبحان من يراني ويسمع كلامي ويعلم مكاني ويرزقني ولا ينساني سبحان رب الجبروت والملكوت والكبرياء والعظمة سبحان رب الجبروت والملكوت والكبرياء والعظمة سبحان رب الجبروت والملكوت والكبرياء والعظمة بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وكفى بالله وليا وكفى بالله نصيرا وكفى بالله وكيلا وكفى بالله كفيلا وكفى بالله سميعا وكفى بالله بصيرا وكفى بالله غنيا وكفى بالله رزاقا وكفى بالله ودودا وكفى بالله وهابا وكفى بالله حفيظا وكفى بالله سلاما وكفى بالله وليا وكفى بالله نصيرا وكفى بالله وكيلا وكفى بالله كفيلا وكفى بالله سميعا وكفى بالله بصيرا وكفى بالله غنيا وكفى بالله رزاقا وكفى بالله ودودا وكفى بالله وهابا وكفى بالله حفيظا وكفى بالله سلاما بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إنا أنزلناه في ليلة القدر وما أدراك ما ليلة القدر ليلة القدر خير من ألف شهر تنزل الملائكة والروح فيها بإذن ربهم من كل أمر سلام هي حتى مطلع الفجر يا قادر علي قادر يا قدير علي قدير يا مقتدر علي مقتدر يا سلام السلام يا قادر علي قادر يا قدير علي قدير يا مقتدر علي مقتدر يا سلام السلام يا قادر ọba lágbára yà kọ̀díhìrú ọba ṣèyí tóun ṣèyí ta fẹ́ fún wa yá mú kó tẹ́lẹ̀ ọba tí kì í ṣàṣetì yà sàlámù gbọ́rọ̀ wá tẹ́sọ̀ o yà kọ́dìrú àlìkọ́dìrú yà kọ́dìhìrú àlìkọ́dìhìrú yà mú kó tẹ́lẹ̀ àlìmùkọ́tẹ́dìrú yà sàlámù àsàlámù yà kọ́dìrú àlìkọ́dìrú yà kọ́dìrú àlìkọ́dìrú yà mùkọ́tẹ́dìrú àlìmùkọ́tẹ́dìrú yà sàlámù àsàlámù. Ya Qadiru Qadiru Ya Qadiru Qadiru Ya Muqtadiru Muqtadiru Ya Salamu Assalamu Ya Qadiru ọba lágbára Ya Qadiru ọba ṣèyí tóun ṣèyí ta fẹ́ fún wa yá mú kó tẹ́lẹ̀ ọba tí kì í ṣàṣetì yá sàlámù gbọ́rọ̀ wá sẹ́sọ̀ o yá kọ́dérò àlèkọ́dérò yá kọ́dérò àlèkọ́dérò yá mú kó tẹ́lẹ̀ àlèmú kó tẹ́lẹ̀. Ya salamu assalamu bismillahirrahmanirrahim a'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim ya ayyuhalladhina amanu idha nudiya lis-salati min yawmil jumu'ati fas'au ila dhikrillahi wa dharul bay'a dhalikum khairun lakum in kuntum ta'lamun فإذا قضيت الصلاة فانتشروا في الأرض وابتغوا من فضل الله واذكروا الله كثيرا لعلكم تفلحون وإذا رأوا تجارة أو لهوا انفضوا إليها وتركوك قائما قل من عند الله خير من الله ومن التجارة والله خير الرازقين يا رحمن ارحمنا يا كريم أكرمنا يا رزاق ارزقنا يا نصير انصرنا ويا سلمنا يا رحمن ارحمنا يا كريم أكرمنا يا رزاق ارزقنا يا نصير انصرنا ويا سلام سلمنا يا رحمن ارحمنا يا كريم أكرمنا يا رزاق ارزقنا يا نصير انصرنا ويا سليمنا يا رحمن ارحمنا يا كريم أكرمنا يا رزاق ارزقنا يا نصير انصرنا ويا سلام سلمنا يا رحمن ارحمنا يا
أكرم يا رزاق ارزقنا يا نصير انصرنا يا سلام سلم يا رمان ارحمنا يا كريم أكرمنا يا رزاق ارزقنا يا نصير انصرنا يا سلام سلام.
So making it possible for us all the time that we open our mouth to do azkar. Scholars of zikr told us that azkar is more powerful, is more effective, more important than dua. Dua is when you do supplication. Oh Allah, do this for me. Oh Allah, do that for me. Oh Allah, do this for me. We are told azkar is more important and more effective. Reason because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, that says, وَيَدْعُ الْإِنسَانِ بِشَارُ دُعَاءُ بِالْخَيْرِ. Mankind will always ask for good, for bad things sometimes, the way they used to ask for good things. وَكَانَ الْإِنسَانَ عَجُولًا, because man is always, because we are in the age, we don't know what to ask sometimes. So, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told us, scholars told us that azkar to Allah is more effective. Because whatever you ask, what you don't remember, Allah will do it for you. When you say, Ya Qadiru, Ya Qadiru, Ya Muqtadiru, Ya Salam. Or when you say, Subhanallah man yaroni, oh Allah, Subhanallah, glorify to your name, oh Allah. Man yaroni, you know it very well. And you know where I am. Wayatma'u kalami, you can hear me, all my words. Where I'm situated at the moment, oh Allah, you know it. You are the one that will provide for me because you don't forget. Allah don't forget us. So, as God is better. Now we are going to Allah. Let us ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala what we want. Let us remember ourselves in our supplication. Let us remember our family, our immediate family in our supplication. Let us remember our family, extended family in our supplication. Let us remember our neighborhood. There is a saying that your neighbors are your family. Let us remember our neighbors in our supplication. Let us remember our community in our supplication. Let us remember our society. Let us remember Lagos State. Let us remember our leadership in Lagos State. Let us remember our leadership in Nigeria in our supplication. May Allah continue to guide them aright. May Allah bless us in our supplication. May Allah continue to bless us in our supplication. May Allah give whatever we ask from Allah. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Ya alamal wujudi wa ya nurul aqwali. Ya qadi al humuri wa ya malik al wujdani. Ya ghalib al junudi wa ya musbit al furqani. Ya hadi as suduri wa ya muntaha al ridwani. Ya muqallib al qulubi wa ya munzil al qur'ani. Ya muqallib al qulubi ويا منزل القرآن يا محدد الهدود ويا كريم الميزان يا واجد الشهود ويا مفضل الإنسان يا قابل السجود ويا رفيع القربان يا منجز العهود ويا فريد الإنسان يا بديع البروج ويا قديم السلطان يا مقلب القلوب ويا منزل القرآن. May Allah guide us aright. May Allah protect us. May Allah continue to protect us. May Allah continue to protect us. Protect our family, protect our children, protect us, especially those who are in Dawa. May Allah continue to protect them all. May Allah protect all our teachers. May Allah continue to protect us, all the students. May Allah guide us aright in listening to them. May Allah guide them aright in teaching us the better knowledge. May Allah continue to protect all those who we know as scholars. And may Allah continue to guide us aright as well. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم يا حي يا قيوم يا دافع يا قاهر يا قهار اكيار كل من أرادني بدور بقهارك يا من أخرج آدم من الجنة ورده ويا من دار أيوب وشافه ويا من جعل داع موسى ونجاه ويا من رفع عيسى إلى السماء يرفعني ويا من جعل يونس في بطن الحوت وأخرجه ويا من نجا نوحا وقومه مما يصفان ناجني ويا من سلام إبراهيم من نار نمرود سلمني من كل الفزاع والحزن والزيد والهم والغم والطول والشار والفقر والمرض ومن كل انتشار الجن والإنس ومن جميع مصائب الدنيا والآخرة يا أرحم الراحمين ويا من أخرج يوسف من غيابة الجب والسجن وزينه بالحسن يا قديم الإحسان إحسانك القديم يا دائم يا قيوم يا كريم حسبنا الله ونعم الوكيل ونعم المولى ونعم النصير وأيوب إذ نادى ربه أني مسني الضر وأنت أرحم الراحمين فاستجبنا له فكشفنا ما به من ضر وآتيناه له ومثله معه رحمة من عندنا والذكر للعابدين قل لا يصيبنا إلا ما كتب الله لنا هو مولانا وعلى الله فليتوكل المؤمنين. الفاتحة. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون والسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين. صلوا على رسول الكريم صلى الله عليه وسلم. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Are we not happy to be here today? Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. I'm happy to see you all. We're happy to have you all back to the mica floor. Can we move forward so we fill the spaces in front so we don't get distracted? Please come forward. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. May Allah guide our brother. May Allah continue to preserve his life for the deen. Mustafa Shafi, Jazakumullah khairan. That's short as scarf. Today, like we all know, it's a very big day. We're going to do some international politics, some very good enlightenment, and maybe paradigm shift from what we already know. May Allah make this knowledge sharing session a beneficial one for all of us. On our floor today, we have our very popular Dr. Muhammad Adebayo Salisu, the Chief Imam, Black Muslim community, a neurological surgeon, like he called himself, Surgeon Kikiri. He's a pediatric neurological surgeon. So at this point, I don't think I have so much to say other than to call our brother, Dr. Salisu. Please come forward and have the microphone. Atekze.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونصلي على رسول الكريم. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن سيدنا محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد. Brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I missed the last few seconds of what Mutalib was saying, so I do not really know whether he was abusing me or he was insulting me or whatever it is that he was saying. But I'll just assume that he was trying to be nice. What we are to look at today is not a one episode event. It's actually a very long story. So what we can only do today would be an introduction, which itself is not even guaranteed to finish. Wherever it stops, that's what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has willed. But you will understand in the sense that we're actually talking about the history of man, actually. And so if you look at man, the Bible history, it says that man is 6,000 years old. Of course, there are people who say otherwise. So even if we took the Bible history of the history of man being 6,000 years old, starting from Adam, how can we speak about 6,000 years that relates to several billions of people on the platform we know as Earth that has over 192 countries or so? And so which part of it are you going to pick? It's like somebody saying that I should come and talk about the story of Nigeria in 1.5 hours. Or, okay, let's not talk about Nigeria in 1.5 hours. Let's talk about the Yorubas in 1.5 hours. Can you do that? Okay, let's talk about the Egbas in 1.5 hours. Can you do that? Can you do the, what's it called? What's that group in where Obasanjo comes from? You know, can you speak about them in 1.5 hours? So you now say you want to speak about the whole of human beings in 1.5 hours. It can't happen. But what we can do is that those are micronutrients. It's important, however, if we start with a bird's eye view, and then we now start to cool down, and all of a sudden, because we all have glimpses of the bird's eye view, we start to recognize. If you remember when you look at the GPS satellite, particularly, you know, the way channels used to do, when they start from the Earth and then they start coming down, they start seeing countries, they start seeing monuments and all of that. So that's what I hope, that when we start now, you'll be able to start to see how it comes down. The only part that I took from what I was given was, they said, the devil and the rest of us. That's very scary, isn't it? But you see, even that itself, it's the summary of it all, but it's also a bird's eye view. So I then decided, when he now went ahead and he said the history of international politics and all of that, I said, no, that was too broad and that was too vague. Let me break it down. So I now said, okay, devil and the rest of us, and then I will start that part, and then we'll now talk about history, religion, civilization, and politics. You can see yourself that each one of these are very, very large things, but you also be surprised to see that they are actually linked. And there's a point in time when you are going to be like, is he going to tell us about the story of Mansa Musa, which is history, isn't it? Then all of a sudden you start hearing about Abraham, Isaac, Moses, Jesus. You are going to be like, is he doing religion? You get what I'm saying? Then you start hearing about the Archimedes, you hear about the Persians, you hear about the Egyptians, and then you start to say, what's this guy doing? Is he doing civilization? You know, and then all of a sudden you start hearing political statements and all of that. So all I just want you to do, what I try to do, I hope they're able to find it. I did a schematic of 2 pages that so that you can follow because there are too many branches. So after a while you start getting lost, lower kind of like. But I hope they find it. Otherwise, just try as much as possible to follow, and then you can ask me questions at the end. So where do I want to start? In Surah Al-Baqarah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said in verse 30, وَإِذْ قَالَ رَبُّكَ لِلْمَلَائِكَةِ إِنِّي جَاعِلٌ فِي الْأَرْضِ خَلِيفَةً. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala called the angels together and said, I'm about to send a vicegerent, an ambassador to earth, جَاعِلٌ فِي الْأَرْضِ خَلِيفَةً. Then it was said that the angel said, أَتَجْعَلُ فِيهَا مَا يُفْسِدُ فِيهَا وَيَسْفِكُ دِمَاءَ. That, you know, he now gave what truly was our characteristics. Atajalu fiha. Are you going to send ma yusidu fiha? People, you know, who are going to cause facade on the earth. Wayasfiku dima, and they're going to shed blood. And really, if you look at it, what do we do? Give me characteristics for no reason. You look at Sudan, whether it's South Sudan or not Sudan. Suddenly now, South Sudan, after all the settlement, the next thing they go and arrest vice president. And then Wala start again. Look at the original Sudan. For the last 2 years, they are fighting themselves. Go to Afghanistan, go to Syria, go to Palestine, go to Ukraine and Russia. You know, look, go to Myanmar. They just wake up and start killing themselves for no reason. You know, so why have people demand they're going to kill themselves? And you know, and they now say, but you know, God, though, why not have the subject will be something? We, the angels, all we do is just praise your name. Why not call this flat? We are always obeying you. We are always doing whatever it is you ask us to do. Why don't you send us instead? You know, like when the Nigerian government says for every new government is an opportunity to appoint different people, and part of which we are ambassadors. And then you now start seeing people lobbying. And even apart from lobbying to ambassadors, some will now to be ambassadors to Europe, America, to China, and not to Benin Republic or Togo. But it's at all bad. It's when you now don't get anyone. I would rather be ambassador in Benin. You understand? Ambassador Loje, ambassador at all bad, kind of like. So that is the value, because an ambassador is actually the president of that country in another country. And the environment where it is, which they call the embassy, is actually, if you have a Nigerian ambassador in Europe or in Cameroon, for example, that space where it is Nigeria. And no Cameroonian can enter into that place except they get permission. It doesn't matter what. That is how it is. Of course, you and I know that people break these rules once in a while, but generally speaking, that's what it means. So they said that, and then Allah says, I know what you don't know. You know, and then Allah went ahead and said, Adam, and we taught Adam asma'a kullaha, and we taught Adam the knowledge of all things. This thing sounds simple, sounds straightforward, and you can look at it literal terms. You know, so if you look at it on the literal level, it can be explained literally. When you say that Allah said, Adam asma, he taught Adam the names of something. It's that simple. He taught Adam the name of everything. You know, and then, but if you then look at it on the deeper level, you see that it is beyond just saying Adam asma, that he's just teaching Adam the name of things. It's actually the awareness of what is, what has been, what will be. And then you now say, Summa qala al-malaikatu anbi'uni bi asma'ihim. You know, after having told Adam what everything is, he now told the angels, because these are the people who were telling Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that these are the people who are people who will kill themselves, people who will destroy the world. You know, how people you down, all these human beings, all these Shafi people that are going to say, "Well, Badu." You know, Shafi Badu. Why would you say Shafi? If I can't remember from Badauda, you know, these are people to do. They're going to. You get the point. Allah said, "Oh, okay. So you think you know, Abi? Okay, because you know, and bihuni, they are ihim. Oh yeah, tell me now, kilele. Tẹ́lẹ̀ bá lọ bá ilé kí ló máa ṣe? Kí ni eléyìí máa ṣe níbí báyìí? Tábà gbé lè síbi kí ló máa ṣe? Kọ́ọ̀lù Subhanaka. Like they will say inside, kò tó alẹ́ bàbá. Àbí? Subhanaka. Ìpè kí la mọ̀? Ilà máa alábùtánà. Innaka anta al-alim al-hakim. You are the all-knowing and you are the all-wise. I hope you guys are seeing this trend. So if you follow this trend, there are two things that become obvious. There was a description of the nature of man, and two things stand out about the nature of man. Facade, they're going to cause corruption on earth. And if you look at all that is happening on earth, then you will say that àṣetòótọ́ ni àwọn màláíkà sọ. Àwọn people you want to come máa parọ́, kọ́ máa jalè, tẹ̀mbẹ̀lẹ̀kún, ọ̀tẹ̀, you know, all these bad things. So the angels were right, isn't it? And then he said, Wayasikodima, they're also going to shed blood. And if you really look at it, you don't share the Ukraine story alone. Do you know that I'm not able to actually read or watch the videos of Ukraine? (2022) till today, in the battle between Ukraine and Russia, the maximum number of children that have been killed in that war is not up to 1,000. That's 3 years and how many months? 2 months. But in 18 months of the battle between, is it even battle? The attack by the Israel. You see what I'm saying? Because if they say two fighting, I'm like this, you are like this. But if they tie my hands behind my back and start pummeling me, is that two fighting? You are beating me. That's what they will say. Is that not? So if I start doing and then I now say he's fighting me back, is that fighting back or is feeling pain? So if in the process of my doing and then I hit you, you now say you see he has hit me. You see he's fighting me. I mean it becomes very senseless kind of like. So in one day, March 18, 187 children are died. But all in all, close to 19,000 children have died in the bombardment of Israel, from Israel of the Palestinians. So when Allah and the angels were telling Allah, why are people demand that they will shed blood? You understand? And that is what will these characteristics of men, which the angels said, is what gives back to all of the issue of what you see in history and what you see in politicking. But when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, Inni a'lamu ma la ta'lamun, that Allah is speaking to the characteristics of man, the elevated characteristics of man, from which you get prophets, from which you get the beloved ones of Allah, the saints of Allah, and you see even ordinary people that will perform extraordinary things. Things which even the angels themselves will say, Twale Baba, we cannot bear. So if we keep these two things in mind, then let us now look at the beginning. You understand? So Allah sent Adam. Of course, remember I said it's a bird's eye view. Along the line, we'll go a little bit more microscopic about some of these issues. So if you get that fundamental about the characteristic of man, corruption and bloodletting, so you can then understand why we have so much disaster. But then if you look at the other characteristic of man, where Allah gave him knowledge, gave him wisdom, then you can see how we have all of these development, science, bridges, planes, rockets, and all of that. Now, so Allah sent Adam. And then Adam had his wife, and then they started to have children. So let's now jump from Adam. We're not going to speak about his two sons, you know, we're not going to speak about them. We'll just jump them and look at his great-grandson, which was Noah. You understand? And so now Noah was reported to have had 4 children. Again, if we just decide and look at the 4 children, he had 4 children called Ham, Sam, Yam as an issue, and Yafis. I'll repeat it again. He had 4 children called who? Ham, Sam, Yam, and who? Yafis. Now, if you look at history, you see that each one of all these 4 actually gave birth to different groups of the human population. There's a group that eventually became the beginning of the Westerners. There's a group that became the beginning of the Africans, that is Ham. And there's a group that gave birth to the Middle Easterners, and that is who? Yes. What are the Middle Easterners? The what? How do you call the Middle Easterners? The Arabs, the Aramics, the Jews, they are beautiful. So Semites are from Sam. Are you getting what I'm saying? The Semites are from Sam. The Hamites are the Africans, and Ham had children, you know, some of them, you know, so let's just leave that. So we will not speak any further about Ham, Yafis, and Yam, because that is another story entirely. And the reason again being that the people from Ham actually are the people of Yam are actually the people that come and give you the Westerners. But you see, the Westerners only become relevant after several years. The Westerners only became relevant from, say, the Crusades. And so you will see that from like 6000 BC, they did not become relevant for the first 6,000 years. And then they only became relevant from the second millennia, when the Crusades had contact with the Muslims. And when they now fought with the Muslims, after the time when they were dying of the bubonic plague in France, in England, in Germania, that was the time when the streets of Cordova had street lighting. Are you getting the point? They had street lighting. They had, what's it called? They had agriculture. They had they had water being piped into their houses. So it was when they came and fought the Muslims and saw all those things, and they now went back. Then that was when their Italian scholars who mixed with the Muslims, their British scholars, their French scholars, the German scholars who mixed with the Muslims said, hey, wow, when we went to kill those Arabs, we saw them doing this, we saw them doing that. Let us do it here. And that was the birth of Western civilization. Are you getting the point? So I just rapidly jumped for you to understand why I'm not going to speak about them at that point. Reason being that between that time when Yam came and these fans, they were just busy hunter-gatherers and all of those kind of things. So they were totally irrelevant. Just as the Arabs were totally irrelevant until Islam came. For you to know how irrelevant the Arabs were, when the Persians were on this side from the east, and then the Romans were on this side, and they were fighting themselves. In between them were the Arabs. Do you know both of them would dodge and when they were useful, and they will go and wipe out any other group of people and just leave the Arabs alone. Which is also the reason why when Umar Anhu, when he went to Jerusalem to take over the keys, you remember his general then? I'm trying to remember. Mustafa, do you remember the name of that general? Abu, what's his name? The one that died in Jerusalem from the husband of Asma. What's his name again? That top general. I hope I remember again. No, it's not Khalid. You know, Khalid died at home. The soldiers that died in Jerusalem from the Taun that happened, where several hundreds of Muslims, you will remember, it's Abu, something very tough guy like this. He's the one that was reported that, you know, when he was fighting one of the wars, that there was one very tough Roman soldier that covered all his body and only left a tiny space for seeing. And they said this guy, he used his spear and pierced through that thing and through the head of that guy. Took it out. So that was how powerful these guys were. Abu, it's not Abu Salama. No, it's not. This one is Saladin. Is many years. I'm talking of Eli, the companion of the prophet. These are Sahabas. We all remember it as we go along. Anyway, so what I'm trying to bring up at that point is that, you see, when Umar got there, because this guy, this Sahaba and the other Sahabi, they had mixed with the Christians, and they saw how lavish these people were. They would wear velvet robes, put a lot of gold, jewelry. So when Umar came, we all know the story of Umar. He was himself and his servant with one, the camel or horse, whatever, and they were exchanging, you know. But eventually, the way they had agreed was that by the time they were about to enter Jerusalem, it was the turn of the servant to ride the horse, and Umar was the one that was walking. And to add insult to injury, they were now going to pass a place that was muddy, and Umar had to walk through the mud. So not only was he walking, he was also dirty. And then, according to reports again, the cloth he was wearing was torn and repaired in 14 different places. There were stitches in 14 places. Can you guys just imagine your president, Tinubu, being like that? You know, I'm sure you can't, when even your local government chairman, even your ordinary councillor, who cannot be like that. You understand? So that was how it was. But what now happened was, the Sahaba, who was the general of the Muslim army, when he saw that Umar was coming, he quickly ran out to meet Umar. And when he saw the way Umar was dressed, he now told him, why was saying this place for Abai? How can you be looking like this? In fact, the way you see me, I'm like a king relative to the way Umar was dressed. And he was telling Umar, bro, she buy now. You get to chop there, you know, that kind of thing. And then Umar was about to just slap him in the chest and say, who are you? Who were we before Islam? What makes you think that our Izzah, our honor, is in clothing? Were we not the same people who were burying our daughters alive? Were we not the same people who were killing ourselves for several, years over very minute things? What made us who we are? Is it not Allah and His Prophet and the Quran? So, you get the point. So we need to understand these sorts of things to be able to get how come we are where we are today. You know, these are just snippets. So let me take you back. So Sam gave back to the Semites. Are you getting the point? And these Semites are the Arabs, the Jews, the Aramaic, and then part of the Turkish people. Are you guys getting it? So really, when you say Semites, there are 4 groups of people. But today, when you hear anti-Semites, what do people talk about? they talk only about the Jews. So that's also politics, international relations, distortion of history. So we now go, the great grandson of Noah, of Noah was Abraham, who we call Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam. Now, so this is where the real story starts from. Are you getting it? Ibrahim was born in a place called Ur in today's Iraq, very close to the Tigris River. And anybody who knows about the story of the Middle East will remember three major rivers: the Tigris, the Euphrates, and what? The Nile. No, the Nile. The Tigris, the Euphrates, and the Nile. Remove those three rivers, you forget about the Middle East. So he was born close to the Tigris River. We all know the story that his father was a sculptor of idols, and he was also the one that kept their idols. It was like the Babalao or whatever it is. He was the one that was, and Abraham, basically, because of time, Abraham eventually, we all know what happened to him, and eventually left. By that time, he was married to his wife, Sarah. There were three of them that left Ur of the Chaldeans. It was a group of people, they were called the Chaldeans. It's another story. Again, I've skipped so many things because you will still need to hear me speak to the Arabs and the Middle East before Islam. People think that before Islam, the Middle East and the Arabs were just a totally useless people. But we must remember that the Middle East also had some bit of Persians, it had the Babylonians, and there's nobody who will speak about the ancient past that will say you've never had a Babylonians. You remember The Richest Man in Babylon, that book. You remember the book, The Richest Man in Babylon. It is because of the story of Babylon. And I don't know whether you've also heard about Sumeria. It was the Sumerians that were the first people that invented writing. Are you getting the point? Then you probably will have heard about the Assyrians. Assyrians were the first people who started modern agriculture and administration. Then apart from the Sumerians, the Assyrians, there were also the Chaldeans. And then there was also the Parthians. You probably, those who are in military, there's my brother here, I don't know whether he has left. There's something they call the Parthian charge. It's a military technique which the Parthians developed. And that was what they used to destroy the Romans. So this was pre-modern Arabia, pre-Islam. So before Islam came, the people in that area in the Middle East, the Parthians, the Sumerians, the Assyrians, the Babylonians, they were people who had devised things which eventually cascaded down because one civilization or one group of people were always swallowing another group of people. And so when you swallow, you pick up whatever they have, you add your own to it. In fact, there was this scholar called Ibn Khaldun, who was reported to be the first major historian who was writing the history of civilization. And the way he summarized civilization was that it usually starts with a group of, nomads who become farmers around a river area. Then when they gather, they become a larger group of people. They become settled. They have farms, they have sheep, they have whatever it is that they have, isn't it? So they now start to have things that other people who are roaming around the place don't have. They have a settled life. They have stores. They are keeping food. They are keeping animals. But there are also others who are just roaming around. Just like in Nigeria now, you have villagers in settled places. Naturally, once you talk about villagers, you talk about farms. You talk about bands, and you talk about animals, isn't it? You talk about chickens and all those things. But the ones that are just scavenging all over the place, the nomads, what do? Our boys unique, they attack them. You understand? So you find a bunch of nomads who are like warriors. So they attack the farmers and take over. So because they are very stubborn, they don't have anything to lose. It's only the shirt on their back. So they are fighting, they will take over from the farmers, and then they take over the place. And then they will settle. So it's like, they conquer, they consolidate, they expand. When they consolidate, they are now our boys, like the military will do. Take over a government, then they consolidate, then they start to expand. And of course, naturally, after a while, they lose the ability to fight war. They start to degenerate. Another group of nomads will come again and start the process all over again. They conquer, they consolidate, they expand, and then they degenerate. But you see, as this cycle is going from one group to another, what always happens is that they acquire new ways of doing things. And so you add to whatever it is that you make. And that really is the basis of civilization. So there is no one group of people that are the founders of civilization. People just add to whatever they meet. But you guys will now tell me that, but what we understand is Western civilization, the Oyibo people, they did this, they did that, they did that. We will see down the line whether that is true or it is not. So I take you back that so Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam, he left with his wife Sarah and his nephew. What's the name of his nephew? Lot alayhi salatu wasalam. So they now came to Canaan. They crossed from in Iraq, and then they enter into that area that they call Canaan. That is in the Levant. And the Levant is made up of Syria, Lebanon, Palestine, and a bit of Turkey, the southern part of Turkey. Remember, I spoke to you about the Semites, and they were made up of 4 people: the Arabs, the Jews, the Aramic, and then the southern Turkey, isn't it? So that's actually that area they call Canaan. If you then allow me to explain a little bit, what is the story of the Canaanites? That's the Canaanites. What actually happened is that it depends on whose story you are listening to. If you listen to the Israeli story, it's an interesting thing. You will hear them say. But if you listen to neutral people who are neither Arabs nor Jews, then you are more likely to understand. What the neutral people say is that that place, Canaan, is actually a long place where you have Palestine today, where the Palestinians are. Canaan was much wider than that. It extended along the whole of that coast, even up to Turkey. And what really happened is that there were different groups of people that were located in that area. You had, I'm sure you now start to hear names that you've had, either from the Bible or wherever. I'm sure you've heard about the Philistines before. You have heard about Edom before. You have heard about the Moabites before. And then there's another group. It also starts with a P. So these were all the people, Phoenicians. So you can see there was a large group. But all of these people kept mixing, intermixing, fight themselves, kill themselves, this one, this one. Then another group of people came. They were called the Sea people. You understand? So these people were called the Peles. Peles, Palestinian, Peles. Are you getting the point? So they were called the Sea people. They came from somewhere. So they too came and mixed, but they became the dominant group. Now, the name over time changed to become what is called Palestine. Long before even Abraham came from Ur in Iraq, came to Canaan, isn't it? So long before even Abraham came to Canaan, this group of people were already there. Are you getting the point? Now, I will leave it at that for now. By the time Abraham came to Canaan, I will also say something that those of us who know about, who have had contact with Christian and the Christian, when I was in secondary school, there were these beautiful comics of the Christian, whatever story, Bible stories. You will remember that there is in the Bible, there is a guy they call Melchizedek. You've heard about Melchizedek. Actually, Melchizedek, his true name is Malik Esodik, the truthful king. Malik Asodik. Just like, for example, now, I'm sure if I say Avicenna, you guys will think he's one European guy, isn't it? But those who know, who is Avicenna? It's a Persian, Ibn Sina. Huh? Ibn Sina is Avicenna. Now, if you hear the word algorithm, what are you going to think? Wow, it must be one British or French this thing. Is that not? That's Al-Awarisi. Or algebra is what? Algebra. Or you hear things like, oh, the first scientist was that guy, that British guy. Newton. What if I tell you that 600 years before Isaac Newton, there was a guy called Ibn al-Haytham? I'm sure when you talk about the history of optics, they are going to start mentioning some funny names, Abi. But Ibn Haytham started all of this. Are you guys getting where I'm going? So if I take you back again, you will therefore see that there was a king in that place called Canaan. When Abraham came with his, have you gotten it? So the history, religion, and something, the word document. So when Abraham got there with his wife Sarah and his nephew Lut, after some time, Lut was now sent from Canaan to, I've forgotten the name of the other place. The people of Sodom and Gomorrah, that's where Lut went. There was now Abraham, his wife Sarah, and after some time, Hagar joined as the second wife. But when Hagar gave birth to his son, Ismail, Allah instructed Abraham to take Hagar and the son Ismail to where? To Makkah. You get the story. Now, an interesting thing starts to happen here. When Abraham takes Hagar to Makkah and leaves her beside the Kaaba, what is the first distinguishing thing that happened that all of us know about till today? It's very obvious. People drink it. Fantastic. Zamzam, isn't it? And Zamzam to Kaaba is what? But at that time, nobody knew about the Kaaba. And then if you now start to talk about the story of the Kaaba, you now start to see argument about who first built the Kaaba. Some say it's Adam. Some say no. Adam was there, he went to the Kaaba, but he knew he was holy ground. And they will now say no, it was Abraham and Ishmael. It depends on whose argument you want to believe. But that is just that story. So at that spot where Abraham left Hagar, then came the Zamzam. Let me now divert a little bit. Since I'm speaking about Ishmael, as at that time, that place is what became Makkah. But you see, it's a desert area. And in the desert, water and the oasis. All of us know that where there's no water, there's no life. The people around that area were all nomads, and everybody's always going around looking for water. As at that point, there was a dominant nomadic group. They were called the Jurhum. Are you getting it? There were many nomadic groups there, but the dominant nomadic group there were the Jurhum. They had actually taken over from another group that was there before them. Now, the Jurhum noticed something. They saw birds hovering over a particular place. By the time they tracked it, that's when they saw Hagar and Ishmael. These are very powerful nomads. Something interesting happened. Instead of them to go there and just take over the place from Hagar, they were seeking permission. That would you give us permission to stay with you? And according to the Prophet said, Hagar was so happy that there are other human beings here. But she now said something. She said, okay, I allow you, but you must recognize that the water belongs to me and my son. Are you getting the point? Allah gave her that wisdom. And guess what? The Jurhum agreed. And Ishmael, even though he came from where? Being the son of Abraham. because he mixed with them, grew up with the Arabs, married amongst the Arabs. So that was the foundation of who? The Arabs. But you see, the Arabs actually didn't start from Mecca. Are you getting it? You know where they came from? The Jurhum. You know where they came from? Huh? Africa. Okay. Kneel down and raise up your hand. Now, you will now see something. I'm going to mention something that you now need to pay attention to. Yeah. So I want us to look at this. So you can see I started with Nur and then Ham, Sam, Yam, and Yafin. Okay, they scattered it. But from Sam, it came to Abraham as his great-grandson. So we're now with Ishmael. Abi, that's the Arab. We're still going to go to Isaac. So they've scattered the thing I did. But I will still explain it. From Isaac, all those names you see, there are 12 names, so I'll come to that. But for now, I want you guys to focus on Ismail. That's where I'm speaking on right now. So at Ismail's point, he mixed with the Arabs. But the origin of the Arabs is not Mecca. It's not the Arabian Peninsula. The origin of the Arabs is where? Yemen. Remember the hadith of the Prophet that said, at the Kawthar in paradise, when all the Muslims are gathered, trying to drink from the Kawthar, because once you drink from the Kawthar, what happens to you? You will never be thirsty again. And the Prophet is the one that will personally give from the Kawthar for everybody to drink. After a while, something happens. A group of people come. Are you getting it? A group of people come, and then the Prophet will say, let them come. Guess who they are? The Yemenis. Are you getting it? Can you see the Yemenis today? Anybody. They have fought anybody, everybody. They're just like the Afghans. You understand? You know what it's called, the Afghans? They used to call them the grave of all civilization. They have fought the Russians and destroyed them. They fought the British and destroyed them. And then Americans felt they were better. What did they do to the Americans? They ran with their tails. I have not started studying the Afghans, but there's a story about them. You understand? Eh? Thank you very much. You know, yeah, because I started reading about the Mongols too. You'll be amazed from history. You start to understand things that are happening to you and things that are happening in society. Even when we come to this same Nigeria. And so you shouldn't get carried away when people start to tell you things. And that's why people who know, they want to change history. And people who don't know, like Obasanjo, they want to stop you from studying history. And because you stop studying history, so you will not know what has happened and why what has happened has happened. But let's leave the old woman alone for now. So that's the Yemen, and that's the origin of the Arab. But if I just want to tickle you a little bit, you remember the story in the Quran, Saba, the Surah. That was actually what led to the Jurhum leaving Yemen and coming to Mecca. I will leave that for you to try and find out what they did or did not do. Now, so let's come back to Ismail and the mother. So that's how that side is. But today, I will jump from there because before we will come to the Arabs, it will be when the Prophet ﷺ came in 570 AD. So for now, all this story I'm telling you, starting from Abraham, I'm talking of 1800 BC. You see how far that is, isn't it? So from 18, I've just spoken about you. The Parthian charge. You remember the Parthian charge in military school? Yeah. So just for you guys to know what I'm speaking about. So let's now leave Ismail and the Arabs for some time. As let's now go to Ishaq, who is known as what? Isaac. But if I was going to tickle you a little bit more, I'll ask this question. How old was Ibrahim, when he left Ur to go to Canaan? How old was he? Guess, anybody? I did this at Katiba. How old? 90. 90 plus. How many people are living up to 90 nowadays? Guess. This guy is reading books. Yeah, he was 75. I used to give, in Katiba, I gave them money. Should I give you money too? He was 75. And he had Ismail at what age? 10 years later, at 85. Can you imagine? And then he had Ishaq at what age? 100. And despite that, you know, because the gap between Ismail and Ishaq was 15 years. And Ismail still grew to be a young adolescent. That was the time when Ibrahim came and met Ismail with his mother and said, Allah said, I should sacrifice you. You remember that? And it was after that that himself and Ismail now built the foundations of the Kaaba. And then after that, Ismail married. And each time, Ibrahim would go back again, leave Makkah and go back to where his wife was in Canaan. And let's leave that. Otherwise, I'll be wasting too much time. There's something I skip. I was speaking about Melchizedek, isn't it? The true name is Malik al-Sadiq that became Melchizedek. But the Christians will call him Melchizedek, the high priest of Salem, was not born, did not die, and he just went on to the higher heavens. So those are one of the things that you start to see about the contradictions in the Bible. When you start to speak about the characteristics of Jesus, which is the reason why they said Jesus is God. Okay, he didn't die. Melchizedek didn't die. But Jesus was born. Melchizedek was not born. Elijah, he don't die. Elijah too, he go heaven like that. So say, so if Jesus no get father, that's why he's God. How about Adam now? You don't get papa, you don't get mama. How you will speak that one? You understand? So you see where some of these things are. So let's now focus on Isaac. So Isaac was born. Now, interesting. Isaac now had an event in the Bible. They said he fought, some part said he fought with God. You understand? Some said no, he fought with an angel and won. When he fought with God too, he won. When he fought with the angel, he won. And so they now changed his name from Isaac to what? To Israel. Do you know the meaning of Israel? He who fights with God. You get it? Israel is he who fights. It's becoming like Tales by Moonlight, isn't it? But that's how his name became Israel. And I said something the other day. I said, if Israel started with Isaac, and Israelites are from Isaac down to today, so to say, Abraham, is he an Israeli? No. Is he an Israeli? Are you getting the point? So, leaving that, Isaac now had 12 children. Isaac is now Israel. He now have 12 children. They are all boys, the 12 sons of Isaac. Oh, sorry. Isaac had Jacob. I'm sorry, I must have skipped that. That's Jacob. I missed it. Yes. Isaac has Jacob. It's Jacob that fought with their God. And some say he fought with the angel. So sorry, I missed that part. So Jacob now had those 12 children. So Isaac, who gave birth to Jacob, is not the one that fought with God. I'm sorry. So if Jacob is the one that became Israel, and everybody after him became Israel, what will Isaac be? An Israeli? No. Abraham, is he an Israeli? No. So Jacob, which is Israel, now had these 12 sons. You see, those of us who are mixed with Christians, I never forgot that song. Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Issachar, Zebulun, Dan, Naphtali, Gad, Asher, Joseph, Benjamin. Has anybody heard that song before? And you meet so long, and love me the school here. Those of us who went to where school was school, you know? Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Issachar, Zebulun. I didn't have a clue what I was saying that time, but I just loved the song. All of the power the degree. He said, degree. Do you know there was a time in my Form 1, we actually had a visit from the NCCF, Christian Corpus Fellowship, from the university. I know they will always go with music. And I loved music. If I hope Dick can be born again. You know, when you hear those songs, be singing with the song, you just believe you are in heaven and you become born again. So those are the 12. Now, 10 of them, the top 10, had the issue with number 11, who was Joseph. They didn't have problem with Benjamin. And we all know what they did to Joseph. They sold him out. They actually abandoned him for him to die. And Joseph ended up, you know, as a slave in Egypt. Isn't it? And so now, later Joseph became whatever, he became a minister because of the drought and everything. And then eventually brought his father. His father all this while, when Joseph went to Egypt, his father was still in Canaan. Are you getting it? Which is later what became what they are calling Israel today. But when he now went to Egypt, his parents, his family, they were still in Canaan. But when he now brought them from Canaan and brought them to Egypt, the Israelis never went back for 470 years. Note that. The question here to ask is that in that 470 years, what happened to the land of Canaan? But remember what I told you. I spoke to you about the Philistines. I spoke to you about the Moabites. I spoke to you about the Edomites. And he reminded me about, what did you call that group? The Phoenicians. These people were there fighting themselves and killing themselves or whatever. They never left. And then the sea people came that became the Peles. They became the dominant group and became Palestinians. But when you hear the story that's given by today's Israelites, they will say a land without a people. You know, you've never heard that story for a people without a land. Everybody say, clue, but don't share it. Why I'm saying this is that by the time you watch, you read books, or you watch YouTube or whatever, be careful before you watch anything or you read anything. Look at the author. Look at the source. Otherwise, you'll get into trouble. Even with all the knowledge I have, sometimes I'm almost getting into trouble until I will now remember, go and look at the author. Go and look at the source. Look at the funders. I can tell you, if you want, I can show you a few videos that if you watch it, you will just say, these Palestinians are troublemakers. Or the story of Palestine that I have told you is totally different. I have seen Netanyahu describe Israel, and you will say, these Israelis have been cheated. I have seen, what's the name of that guy? It's not Ehud Barak. Down now, people be insensible. There's one other guy, I forgot, maybe Naftali Bennett. I don't know which was between Naftali Bennett and Netanyahu, you know. So there are some real crazy guys amongst these Israelis. But I just want you to know that. Now, you see, but you will ask me a question. How come when Joseph became a minister and brought his family to Egypt, were they slaves? No. When Joseph had become a minister, he had been released. He was no longer a slave. And so they were in Egypt. And they had high position. They were welcome. They were taken care of. But all you guys know about the Israelis and Egypt is what? Slavery. Isn't it? I'll tell you two interesting things. The first one is, when you read the Quran, speak about the ruler of Egypt in relation to Joseph. What does he call him? What is the ruler of Egypt called when it is Joseph? Aziz. So keep quiet. I want other people to speak. What was the ruler of Egypt called when Joseph was in Egypt? Pharaoh. He has given you a clue. Mustafa gave you a clue. And what's Aziz? Aziz is an Arabic word. What's the Aziz? He's a king. Do you understand? He was the king. But all of a sudden, that same Egypt, when Allah was now speaking about Moses in that same Egypt, and he was going to talk about the ruler of Egypt, what was he calling him? And why? Why on one place in the same country is called Aziz, king? In another, that same country is now being called Pharaoh. That is the source where the Israelites transformed from guests and honored people to slaves. If you know that story, you will know why they became slaves. What really happened is that the people who were ruling Egypt at the time when Joseph was there, they were called the Ixos. They were a Semitic group. They were a fighter warrior group. They actually went to Egypt and defeated the pharaohs. They were the 15th dynasty of the Ixos. Are you getting the point? But the Egyptians themselves, who were the majority, never liked the Ixos. But they could not do anything about it. They could only tolerate them. And the Ixos, they called their king Aziz, the king. But the Egyptians, the true Egyptians, their king is known as what? Pharaoh. Are you getting what I'm saying? So much later, 2 centuries later, the Egyptians were able to get rid of the Ixos. And so they had established the new dynasty, the 18th dynasty of the Egyptians. Are you getting it? And that's how Pharaoh came. That also will show you the story why when the Christians tell you that the Muslims copied the Bible. Are you getting it? You will see when the Bible is speaking about Joseph and the king of Egypt, what does he call him? Pharaoh. When he's speaking about Moses and the king of Egypt, what does he call him? Pharaoh. But when the Quran is speaking about Joseph and the king of Egypt, what does he call him? King. When the Quran is speaking about Moses and the king of Egypt, what does he call him? Pharaoh. Another example. It has skipped my mind right now. I was just trying to establish to you where you see some of all of these stories. But all of a sudden, I forgot. You guys seem to start to wonder, when did it go from history to religion, Abi? They're the same. Are you getting it? They're the same. You just suddenly find out that at the point where you thought I was just telling story, which you call history, is story. In fact, some people will now explain that one. It's your own version of what happened. When you hear of the story between the lion and the hunter, Salomon win. Salomon win. So when you notice that, then when you start to talk about the Europeans and the Africans, the Westerners and the blacks, the Americans and the blacks, remember his story. Remember the lion and the hunter. Are you getting what I'm saying? So that word, his story, his story. You now have to start to ask yourself questions. When people tell you this is how it is, you ask yourself, is it really? Just as what happened in Edo State, the hunters and the people of Uromi, and the 18 that were killed. And so some people said, no, they were just hunters. And another people said they were not. They were what? They were not hunters. They were what? They were kidnappers. And then each person starts to defend himself. And then I now see somebody who now says, oh, one of the people killed, my brother, is what? The kidnapper. And my father or my mother and I, we had warned him, this thing you are doing, one day, oh my lady. Now, supposing that were true, does it change the story or not? Supposing it is false, has it not distorted the story? So, his story, your story, my story, whose story? And so for us as Muslims, we have to start to ask ourselves questions. All these things you guys have swallowed, is it really the way it is? Are you getting me? So we now go again, we now go to the Ixos, and then we now have the Pharaoh. So it was the change in governance that led to the Israelites being enslaved all over again. And then down comes Moses. So Moses comes, and then let my people go. Moses and Harun, and then led to the what? The Exodus. Are you guys with me? So the Exodus, they leave Egypt and go back to Canaan. That was after Yusuf's family had left Canaan for how long? 470 years. And I also told you that that space in Canaan was never empty. Of course, you will now start to ask me the questions. So then where Who were the people that were there, if there was anybody? And then, how about the Israeli story of a people without a land for a land without people? That's when we come to the politics side of the story. So they go to Canaan. And then when they now get to Canaan, of course, Moses never got to enter. And you go back to the Quran. Remember when they now crossed? Now this now becomes both history and religion. And part of it, you see the story in the Quran. They now crossed to Canaan. But remember that for centuries, the Israelis had been in Egypt. They suffered. Their women have been raped. Their men have been killed. The Egyptians were idol worshippers. And so they've been influenced. Just like you guys in Nigeria. If you cannot speak English, you'll be called a bushman. Is that not so? Like you Yorubas who call Hausa people uneducated people, even though they are ruling over you. They are not educated, but they are ruling over you. You call Igbo man that he doesn't do anything except Egole. And then the Igbo man will say Yoruba is very careful. Often Malu. You know these foolish things that you people call yourself. There's no difference between all of you. Allah says, Inna akramakum. But you see, you don't think about these things. You just easily get carried away. What your father or your grandfather or anything tells you. If you don't come to what Allah says, what his prophet says, you just continue to follow another person's story. So they get to Canaan, and then Moses tells his people, at the Mount of Sinai. And then when he gets there, I remember that story very well. Allah now asked him, Musa, he said, now, what are you doing here? He said, well, I came to elect Nairobi. So because I'm so excited, I've come to see you. Then Allah said, where are your people? One lady. Allah said, are you sure? Go and see your people and see what Samiri has done to them. You remember that? By the time he got back, what did he see? The red Ifa. Are you getting it? And then when you now ask, when Musa now asked Samiri, he said, Samiri, my cousin, what's this? Moses was a Semite, just like Samiri. And of the 12 tribes, you understand, I think they were both Levites or something like that. Yeah, I think they're both Levites. They were cousins. And Moses was asking Samiri that, why? Why did you do this? Samiri said, I saw that which the people did not. And when the scholars were interpreting, they said what actually happened was that Moses saw Musa Samiri, he was actually also a Musa. He saw the footsteps of an angel. And where the angel stepped, there was like the movement of the sand, almost like a living thing. So he scooped it and put it inside that cow, the heifer that they made out of the trinket. And that's what made the heifer to be making that mooing sound, like as if it was a living thing. Are you getting what I'm saying? And then Allah caused Samiri through Musa. Are you getting that point? So when you read the Quran, you will see that part of it. So now, because of that anger and the repeated tendency of the Israelites to disobey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it was reported that Allah lifted the mountain and placed it over their head and was going to crush them. They now repented and Allah forgave them. But Allah said, because of what you have done, you will not be allowed to enter into Canaan. So for 40 years, like you said, like you also, that's why sometimes you see similarity between the Quran and the Bible, because the origin is the same. And then if you understand why Quran, why Islam, why not Christianity, it's very simple. When computers started, you remember Pentium 1, Pentium 2. In those days, for those who used to Pentium 1, Pentium 2, they used to fight in the offices. You know why they used to fight? If somebody makes a mistake to go and switch off your computer, because to boot that computer can take 30 minutes. Is that not so? But now, as you are pressing the button, before your hand reaches, computer is on because of the processing speed. Are you getting it? So you continue to update. You update. It's still the same computer. It's still the same Microsoft, but it gets better. So the updating of the message of Allah as they corrupted it from the Jews to the Christians and then to Islam. So don't be confused. The origin is same, but the differences are in favor of Islam for a simple reason, which is also why when Islam started in Mecca, Rasul saw Umar and some people reading the book of the Yehudi, if you remember that story, and it changed. What are you doing? He said, no, I don't want you to read this thing. Stop. But many years later, when they now got to Medina, he allowed them to read it. And then when they now asked him, but you didn't allow us to read when we were in Mecca, he said yes. Two reasons. The Quran was still being released. It was still being revealed. And if you people start getting sources of information outside of the Quran, just like it happened to the Jews and the Christians. Secondly, also is the fact that you were not yet grounded in faith. That's why I prevented you. But now, having been grounded, having understood Islam, you can read it, but don't believe and don't what? Don't disbelieve. Do you get the logic? Don't believe and what? Don't disbelieve. Can anybody explain why that is like that? I have explained it. Don't believe because some part of it may not be true. It's those adaptations, those parts that are not true, is why Quran came. Don't disbelieve because some parts of it are what? Are true. And that's where the concept of the Israeliya, those who know. You've heard about the Israeliya. You remember somebody like Abdullah ibn Salam, the first rabbi in Medina that became Muslim. If you remember his story, it's a very interesting one. And there was another Jew who became Muslim. These are people there was a rabbi. These people were highly learned in the Jewish religion. But they also had the story of life from the Jewish perspective. Some true, some not true. Are you getting it? So when these people now became Muslim, and they were scholars, and they now start to interpret verses, naturally, the fundamental basis for your description and explanation of information will be based on your knowledge base. So that is why some stories you will hear that talk about interpretation of verses of the Quran or hadiths of the Prophet, you will find scholars, they will say, this is what is Israeliya. This is actually stories from the Jews. And you will understand me better when you now say, okay, the book of the Jews is what they call the Tanakh, isn't it? But the Tanakh is not the same as what the Christians call the Old Testament. Are you with me? The Christians will tell you it's Old Testament, but the Jews don't call their book Old Testament. They call it what? Tanakh. And Tanakh is an acronym for Tanakh. The Ta is from Torah, which is the one that was given to Moses. The 5 books of Moses: Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, and which other one? Revelation, I mean, whatever it is. I can't remember now. Now, funny enough, even that Tanakh that you have with Moses, alayhi salatu wasalam, was never written down. It's an oral tradition that was just being handed over. The time that you now had the Tanakh becoming what is now what they call today's Jewish Bible, I will tell you when I get to that point. I can guarantee you before I leave, inshallah, I will tell you even if I'm about to end. The second part of the Tanakh is what you call the Nevi'im, which is the story of the prophet. It's actually a story. It is not the revelation from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Just as, for example, you have with the Muslims the Hadith, which is the documentation of the Sunnah of the Prophet. The Sunnah of the Prophet is what? What he said, what he did, what he approved of. Is that not so? So the Nevi'im is the story of the Prophet. And the Prophet, because they are messengers of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they will give you direct things that Allah told them, and then they will also experience and also approve. So it's almost like their own hadith. Are you getting it? That is the Nevi'im. That is the Prophet. And then the Ketuvim, that is the writing. So it's like, the Muslims also have People like all these Imam Malik, Hanafi, Shafi'i, who were now the schools of thought, who now started to interpret and explain what the Quran said, what the Prophet said. Are you getting it? These are writings of the scholars. They are not Allah's revelation. It is the interpretation by the scholars of the Torah and the Nevi'im. Are you getting it? So you have the Torah, Nevi'im, Ketuvim. That is the Tanakh. Now you will now see some other additions which you will find in the Old Testament of the Christians. You will not find it in the Tanakh, which is the Jewish book. Are you following me this far? Okay. So we now find so Moses goes. Then I want to try and rapidly jump this because I need to come to that point here. When Moses goes, remember this story in Surah Al-Kahf, 59 to 81, when Musa, with you shall be known, even though Yusha's name wasn't mentioned in the Quran. It was with his servant, so it was said. And he saw them traveling, and then they got somewhere, they rested, then they left. Then Moses now said, let us eat. And then his servant said, I saw you, our fish no escape. You understand? It was out of fear that I couldn't tell you, and I forgot. Said, but that's the sign. And they went back. You remember that story? So that person, you shall be known, is Joshua. He's the one that took over from Moses, and is the one that eventually took the Israelis into Canaan. And so he now goes down from there. They now started fighting everybody in Canaan, fought the Philistines, fought the Amalekites, fought the Edomites, fought the whatever, and so they established the kingdom of Israel. Are you getting it? Then after several years, they now told their prophet, God kept on sending prophets to them. Samuel, at that point in time, they now told him, they said, we noticed that all other nations had kings. We also want a king. You understand? We want a king. So Samuel prayed to Allah, and Allah said, Talut will be their king. Talut was a nobody. That's Saul. You understand? And then from Talut, when you were Talut, they now fought. And then there was now the fight with the Philistines. It was part of their fight. You remember the Philistines and Jalut, which the Christians called Goliath. But you know, after that time, Jalut was already there. He was initially God-fearing, but he had become arrogant, you know, and Allah was now going to get rid of him. Then there was now David, who was a shepherd. I remember David now took over after Jalut, but David had a wonderful thing about him. He had two things going for him. He had a very sonorous voice. So much so that when he's singing, anything, living and non-living, we join him. Even mountains, we join David. But David just doesn't sing anyhow. What does he do? It's just like the way Muslims, you know, when we're going to Root Nabi, particularly people like Shafi, when he starts to tell you about all their recitations, like all these, Uhibun Nabi, Ya Hashimi, Ya Muhammad, and all of that. So David had those recitations he used to praise Allah with Allah. That's what the Christians call what? Anybody tell me? The Psalms. So much so that if David goes into the wilderness and starts to praise Allah, the mountains will join him, the birds will join him, every living thing will join him. That was the first attribute he had. Second attribute he had is that slightest thing he does, that he thinks he has made a mistake, he will start seeking forgiveness, seeking forgiveness. So Allah loved him. And Allah gave him so much, including that he gave him a river. You know what that river was made up of? Copper. You can just imagine a river of copper. So it was David that started the concept of, you know, doing copper, what's it called? Armor. Yeah. And then after David came his son, Solomon. So it was Solomon that now built the first temple in worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I will then jump and say that after Solomon died, so at the time of David and Solomon, that was the best period of the Israelite kingdom. When Solomon died, his children scattered, and there was a civil war, and they scattered. They now became divided into two. The northern part, which was now known as Israel, and the southern part that was known as what? Judea. The upper part, the northern part, was made of 10 tribes. The southern part was made up of 2 tribes. The northern part became idol worshippers, worshipping Baal, doing all sorts of crazy things. And then came the Assyrians. And then the Assyrians wiped them out, but they couldn't overcome Judea. Then came the Babylonians. Babylonians wiped out the Assyrians, wiped out the Israel, and then wiped out who? Wiped out Judea. And then they now took all of them, not all of them, sorry, they took their top people and took them to Babylon. So that space, they never left. And just because I may forget, you need to get this part. When the Babylonians came, you will hear that the Babylonians emptied the Israelis. No, they didn't. What they did was just to take their top leaders. Some people were left behind. And that place had never been empty. Which is why when you now start to hear, some people ask you this question. They now say, the Palestinians that you see today. And somebody raises this question and say, what if these are the descendants of the ancient Israelis? Let's just assume, because according to history, the Babylonians never took away all of the Israelis. But then somebody says, no, but the people Palestinians are Arab, Christians, and Muslims. Maybe. What if they actually converted to become Arab Christians and Arab Muslims? Yes, the Arabs came at a point in time, mixed with them, and then they became Arabs. But then who is pure in race? If you look at the Jews themselves, are they one race? There are Arabs amongst them. There are Arab Jews. They call them the Mizrahi Jews. There are Europeans amongst them. There are the Sephardic Jews. And then there's the Ashkenazi Jews. Isn't it? No, the Sephardics are the Eastern people. Then there's the Ashkenazi, who are the European Jews. The Mizrahi are the North Africans and the Arabs. I don't know whether you're getting. Then there are also the Ethiopian Jews. You get it? So it's really quite an interesting scenario. Anyway, so you find the situation where the Babylonians also came in and took them away. And then what happened? Cyrus the Great, the Persian king. Cyrus the Great came and defeated the Babylonians and returned the Israelis back to their land. And some people will tell you that Cyrus the Great perhaps was the same person called Zulkarnain. Are you getting the point? That's why when you read of the story of Zulkarnain, he went to the east, he went to the west, and he was said to be a very just ruler. So possibly, maybe that was Zulkarnain, even though he was a Persian. Was very God-fearing, but he did all of the things that he did. The other thing that I want to bring up here, talking civilization. You guys have heard about Syrians. I've told you about them. You've heard about Sumerians. I've told you about them. I told you Sumerians started writing. I told you Assyrians started administration and agriculture. The Babylonians, I've told you about the story of the richest man in Babylon. Babylon was the biggest city that ever had been at that point in time. These were people who had civilization. Then the Chaldeans came and built on this. The Parthians came. The Parthians didn't build any civilization, but they were fantastic warriors. And they were the ones that created what is called the Parthian Church. And so you find out that even this thing you call civilization is an evolution of the history of a people and whatever things they find over the course of time. So when you start to speak the word civilization, we are talking about discoveries, we are talking about growth, we are talking about development and modernization. It didn't start with one group of people. So that in case I forget that point in time. And so you have all of these people, they destroyed that, and then we now come to, after the Babylonians, we now come to 63 BC. You see, we're getting close to AD now. Then came the Romans. Romans at that point in time were actually idol worshippers. Are you with me? They were idol worshippers. So what now happened here was that the Romans destroyed the Babylonians and took over. But then came John the Baptist. You understand? When the Romans came, Jerusalem at that point in time they gave the administration of Jerusalem to a guy called Herod. He was actually also one of the Jews. He was one of the Israelites. But he was a king ruling them. And then when the issue of the prophecy that there was going to be a Messiah that was going to come, you get what I'm saying? That was when Herod now said all children below the age of 2 years should be killed. So even though he was one of them, but he actually was trying to protect his own kingdom. And one of the things that happened was that he wanted to divorce his wife and marry maybe the wife's sister. At that time, John the Baptist, remember that Mary, who was the father of Jesus, was under the care of who? Zachariah. Who was the father of who? Zachariah was the father of who? John the Baptist. Are you getting it? So Mary and John the Baptist are what? Contemporaries. So, no, sorry. Mary is not Mary and, not Mary and John the Baptist. Mary and Jesus were what? Contemporaries. But John the Baptist, no, sorry. Mary was being taken care of by Zachariah. Mary got pregnant. When Allah blessed Mary, and Mary now had was pregnant, Zachariah now prayed to Allah that he wanted a son too. You understand? So John and Isa, Jesus were what? Contemporaries. But the message of Zachariah, of John came before the message of Jesus. And it was John that now baptized Jesus. Now, Herod called for John because then Jesus had not started his own message. Now called for John to come and bless his marriage, to divorce him from his wife and marry the sister. That was Ember. I no go agree. Cut off John's head. Are you getting the point? Now Jesus now came with his own message. Are you getting the point? And then after Jesus now came what is called now I skipped something. You see, when the Jews or the Israelites were taken to Babylon, Babylon was very rife with idol worship. The Assyrians had destroyed the temple. You understand? When the Persians, the Babylonians destroyed the temple, that was the first time. When this guy came, Cyrus the Great, he rebuilt the temple. So that was the second temple. Are you getting it? Now, what now happened was that because Israel, the Judaism was based on temple worship, because they no longer had a temple. So there were 4 groups of Jews. You had what you call the Pharisees. You had what they call the Gnostics. You had what they call the those ones were the troublemakers. I hope I remember. Let me see whether I wrote it down. Yeah, they had the Sadducees. Those were the people that were in charge of the temple. Then you had the Pharisees. You now had the Pharisees are the ones that later became the rabbinic Judaism. Then you now had the Gnostics. It's the Gnostics that became the fathers of the early Christians, who now started early Christianity, and it broke down to what it is today. And then there were the Zealots. The Zealots were the ones who believed in the coming of the Messiah and the fact that the Messiah will help them to kill the Romans and the Israelites will take over all over again. Anyway, so, but while they were in Babylon, that was when the story of the Talmud changed. And that was where a lot of changes into Judaism came. And so Judaism now moved away from temple worship, you understand, to codification of the story, because it was usually an oral tradition. It was now written down in Babylon. So the influence of Hellenism and the influence, okay, I forgot the point in time where the Hellenist people came. That is Alexander the Great. They also came and wiped out the Romans. You understand? No, before the Romans and all of that. So there was now influence of Hellenism, influence of the Persian people, influence of all of those other religions, and they now imputed that into Judaism. So if you read some things in Judaism that sounds like Hellenism, in fact, there was a lot of impact of Hellenism, that is the Greek ideas inside Judaism. There was also the influence of the Persians. There was also the influence of Assyrians. because that was the area where they were. And so that's where Judaism became what you call the rabbinic Judaism. And they're now using the concept of the synagogue. Now, I want to end this particular part by saying that, so by the time Jesus died, we now had the rabbinic Judaism. But there were now, the Sadducees had gone because the were like, you know, kind of like. So out of the Gnostics arose the early Christians. And then the early Christians also took in Paul. But Paul broke away from the early Christians and started his own concept of Jesus as the Son of God. And so that's how they separated. So initially, when the first set of Christians were actually Jews, and they were practicing whatever the Jews were doing, all they just said was to recognize Jesus as the Messiah. But over time, Paul became dominant and changed the orientation and started to say, no, that Jesus is not Messiah, Jesus, Son of God, and then later on, Jesus being God himself. And over time, they now separated from Judaism. The Jews at the beginning did not see the early Christians as being separate from them, because they were still following what the Jews were doing. But it was when the teachings of Paul over the years started, that was when they now said, these ones are no longer practicing Judaism, and that's how Christianity came in. Now, if I stop there, you will see that I have mentioned a lot of I've mentioned the Sumerians, I've mentioned the Assyrians, I've mentioned the Chaldeans, I've mentioned the Babylonians, I've mentioned the Greeks. I think I mixed out the Greeks because after who came, I think the Greeks came before the Romans. Yeah. The Greeks were the ones that wiped out the Babylonians, and then the Romans came and wiped out the Greeks. You will see that all this group of people, they were civilizations. All of them had something to give. So by the time the Romans came, they were idol worshippers. But by 315 AD, something major happened. There was this guy called Constantine. Constantine had a battle, and he had a dream that related to a cross. And he now, I'm just rapidly saying things, he now became a Christian because he felt that if he used the cross, he now made all his soldiers to draw the cross on their shields. And he felt that would make him win the war, and he won the war. And so that's how Constantine became a Christian. There will be argument as regards whether he was a genuine Christian or not. It doesn't matter. But the point is that that was the beginning of Christianity as you know it today. Now, the Christians now took over Rome and took over the Romans, or the Roman civilization as you understand it. And so Rome and the Romans became what? Christian, which is what you see they call the Roman civilization, isn't it? Which you associate with the Western civilization. It's not that simple. And then you also hear that, oh, because the Jews were there, the Jews had always had documentation, they've always written things down, so they had their own way of doing things. So you now hear Judeo-Roman. And then later they now removed the word Roman and replaced it with what? Christian. It now became Judeo-Christian. Are you getting it? There's nothing like that. Because if you go and look at Judaism and look at the message of Judaism, it's not the same thing as the message of Christianity. And I'll only give you one example. When you go and look at the Jewish book, the Tanakh, and look at the description of Jesus Christ in the Tanakh, you will not believe it. Jesus Christ was said to have died in excrement, and they said something else very, very, very nasty about Jesus Christ. So the Jews have no anything to do with Jesus at all. But you see, why this is happening is because the inheritors of the Romans who became Christians, something happened to them. So if I pause there, they were now, oh yes, something now, I will now move into the story of civilization. When you guys hear civilization, you look at it in the context of development. You look at it in context of discoveries. You look at it in context of modernization. But I've tried to trace to you the fact that it is just about society. No society stays stagnant. They will do newer things. They will find newer ways of doing the same thing. And sometimes they achieve some major breakthroughs. And that's how it is. But you see, what the Roman civilization had was that they had only two things going for them. They were good administrators, and they were also soldiers. And so they were able to keep people in check. It's not like they devise new things, but when they go to any new community, they meet them, they will kill them, and take over whatever they found there and add to what they had. Which is why I came across one guy called Professor Abraham Gray, the black man. In fact, it was so bad that what he said is that he doesn't understand why people say that the Westerners have civilization. He said Westerners don't have any civilization. That what Westerners are, they are just colonialists and murderers. That they never devise anything new. All they do is go to where people are instead of asking them to dash them. They don't. At that point, I have a 5-minute for something second video if you want to watch it. And I just started laughing. And really look at Israel. What are they doing there? Look at America in weather. Look at Spain. Look at Britain. You know, Britain killed 16 million Indians. Is it 16 million or 160 million? I have to go back again. So it's just really, really amazing. Colonialism, racism, ethnocentrism, and all of those sorts of things. Now, you see, what now happened was that after the time the Romans were doing all these things and doing all their conversions, when Alexander the Great, the Hellenistic guy, and he created the Greek civilization, he died. He had a very wide, he died at the age of 32, 33. When he was about to die, his generals asked him, he said, who is going to inherit you? He said, the most powerful. So when he died, the generals started fighting amongst themselves and broke that wide empire that went all the way from Asia to North Africa. Broke it amongst themselves. I have all of those things, but like I said, the last 4 weeks have been crazy, so I couldn't really do the PowerPoint for you. This one that you saw me do, I did it this morning. I did not sleep so that I could do that. Now, when they broke into pieces, there was a guy called Ptolemy in Egypt. You get what I'm saying? He snatched Egypt from them. And then there's a place in Egypt called Alexandria. Do you know how it is like that? It was named after Alexander the Great. Are you getting it? Because he had some plans, but he died early. So that city called Alexandria, Ptolemy now created what is called the Great Library of Alexandria. Are you getting it? Great Library of Alexandria, and all information, all knowledge that was existent in the world was put in the Great Library of Alexandria. And it was estimated that there were at least 1 million books in that great library. After a while, unfortunately, when Rome now switched from idol worship and switched to Christianity, the Pope then, I've forgotten his name, now felt the Christians don't need any book apart from the Bible, and ordered the burning of the Great Library of Alexandria. So when you start to hear about Muslims being what? Illiterate, being Boko Haram, being whatever, it's not Islam. Muslims have never burnt books. It was the Christians, and it was a papal decree that they should destroy every book except the Bible. And then even that same Bible was not made available to the citizens, was only to what? The priests. Until in 1540-something, when was the name of that crazy German guy, Martin Luther, that translated the Bible into what? German. And that was the beginning of the Reformation. That's another story entirely. But in the early first century, destroying all Bible, what's it called? All all books. But something happened. There were Christians. There were rabbis. There were, what do you call them now? All these monks who felt, how can we destroy all these books? So what they did was, they took some of the books that they could save. You understand? They took them and ran away with them. But about that same time, because the Roman Empire and the Persian Empire were always fighting one another. Because the Roman Empire started collapsing, there was a guy called Shapur the Great in Persia. He was able to kidnap 2 battalions of the Romans. He sold one of the battalions into slavery. And the money he made from it, he now took the second battalion and used them to build a new city called Gondi Shapur. Not only did he now do that, he now said, look, I want to rival the library in Alexandria. So he started gathering books. But the Romans didn't like him. So they didn't allow him access to their own books, which they had, which they were already born in anyway. But then they were now Christians. You get the point. But what he had access to were the Chinese books. You know, I've not spoken anything about the Chinese, and I won't do that in this session. He now got the Chinese book. You remember this very powerful, well-known Chinese scholar. His name has skipped me right now. So he had access to it. And it is because of Gondi Shapur that we have access to the early writings of the Chinese. Lao Tzu. If not for that, because Alexandria had been destroyed, all that the Chinese had have lost all of that knowledge. So he got all of those things, and those monks, they now escaped and went to Syria, and then went and met the Persians and said, look, we have these books, and the Persians took them in as immigrants. And that was how the man was able to build the great library of Gondi Shapur. But he called it Academy of Gondi Shapur. Something interesting happened. By 6-7, Islam had come in 630, and the Muslims had expanded. The Muslims destroyed Persia. You get it? So when they destroyed Persia, go to Gondi Shapur. They saw books. And they said, what is this? Those ones said, it is the great academy of Gondi Shapur. What are all these? They are books. What is inside? The knowledge of the world that we're able to get. Muslims said, show us. But these books were written in Chinese, they were written in Greek, they were written in other languages. But the Muslims now said, teach us. And then came in Al-Kindi. Al-Kindi now started translating, because he was a polyglot, started translating all those books to Arabic. So yeah, the book of the Indians too. You know, it's the Indians that gave us 0. Maybe you don't know. Yeah? Yeah, it was the Indians that gave us 0. Because the Indians were very good in math, they were very good in astronomy, and one other thing. They are very, very good in this. And they too have existed over 5,000 years. It's a story for another day. Now, what happened? Okay, so Al-Kindi started the revolution by translating the Hellenistic, the Chinese and everything to Arabic. Then came Ibn Haytham, then came Ibn Sina, Al-Jabr, and all of them, and started the writing. By that time, it was the Abbasids who were in charge of the Muslim world. And the Muslim world extended from the edges of China on the east to as far down as Europe, and then India, and then as far down as North Africa. But what was interesting was that Muslims only formed 2% of that population of the Muslim empire. So how did the Muslims now survive? What they did was call the Persians and say, you know what, we just started even ruling ourselves. We have no clue. They gave the Persians the rulership and the administrative. So the Persians were running the administration. And that's why you also find out that people like Ibn Sina and a lot of all these big boys, even you hear of people like Al-Buhara. Al-Buhara is from Russia. You know, there's this place in USSR, I've forgotten the exact name of that place. So there were so many Asians, there were many Persians, There were people from all over the place, Morocco and all of that. You remember this guy that used to write story of Africa. There was this Moroccan traveler. I've forgotten his name. Al something like that. Ibn Battuta, he was a Moroccan. You know, he traveled 40 years around the whole world, and he was a historian. So the Muslim empire then was made up of anybody from anywhere, even to the point, just so that you would understand how the Muslims were. The person that revived Judaism and made Jews who they are today, guess who he is? The basis of Judaism is a guy called Rambam, Musa Maimonides. Do you know where he was born? He was born in Cordova. Do you know he went to Arabic school? Do you know he could read the Quran? In fact, all that Judaism was before Musa Maimonides was just about laws. There was nothing about ideological thought in Judaism. Judaism was just eat like this, sleep like this, meet your wife like this. There's no explanation of why things should be the way they were. It was Maimonides because he was in with the Muslims. So he took a lot of ideas. If you go and look, the concept of paradise, hellfire, the Jews didn't have it. They only had something called shoal. Just some place, nobody could describe it. So Maimonides that started borrowing from the Muslims, and for the scholars, you know, they now started seeing that Ajibaba you plagiarized and modified it and all of that. So the greatest Jewish scholar was Musa Maimonides, and he was nurtured the Muslims. Interestingly, the Muslim that won, what's it called? And he was a great physician. The Muslim that won Jerusalem back for the Muslims, guess who he was? He was not an Arab. He was a Turkic guy called who? Salahuddin al-Ayyubi. He was never an Arab. In fact, you guys will be shocked that after the first 60 years, there was no serious Arab that served Islam. All names that you are hearing, all these Buhara, Al-Kindi, Al-This, Al-That, Saladin, they are not Arabs. They are Persians, they are Uzbek, they are all this, whatever it was. So it just shows you what has happened to the Arabs. The golden Arab period has gone. Now, what I wanted to bring out here was that Salahuddin al-Ayyubi, that we are all so proud of. You know who his physician was? It was Maimonides, a Jew. Maimonides was his physician. It just shows you how the Muslims were in terms of how related. So I go back to Ibn Haytham. What I wanted to say about Ibn Haytham was that what really happened was the Egyptian king at the time had a problem with the Nile. The Nile used to flood and destroy things. So he now asked for a scholar that will come and build a dam. Ibn Haytham offered, he went. When he got there, he discovered that he could not build the dam. And there was something about the king at that time. If he gives you an assignment, he will kill you. Fortunately, when Ibn Haytham realized that he would not be able to do it, he didn't want the man to kill him. So he started behaving like a madman. So they didn't kill him. They jailed him. Are you getting it? So they jailed him. He spent several years in jail. But while he was in the jail, the jail had just a single window. One day, he noticed the light. And that was how he became the father of optics. So he's the one that developed the camera obscura. He was the one that developed the speed of light. And he was the one that became the first scientist. When he writes an hypothesis, he will test it, he will prove it. And so when you guys hear that, what's the name of that guy we spoke about, that the British people tell you that is the Isaac Newton. Isaac Newton not being able to discover that the way he talked. It was even Haytham. Then this one that you heard about the guy that said he was sitting under the tree and over the law of gravity, it all of power. He's one of these Persians or Arab, you know. So this is like, you remember I told you the lion and the hunter. Wallah, you guys will be shocked. So now what happened was that all of these scholars, so that should be a story for another day about the scholarship of Muslims and Western and civilization as it is. Now, unfortunately, Muslims with Iraq, the development, the Abbasids, they became very lazy. They became too nitty-picky. They now started fighting over the size of beards, whether if you are going to pray, you do like this, or you hand your hand like this. And then the Mongolian hordes came, destroyed them, and on and on and on. And then the Crusades also came. When the Crusades came, after the time before the Crusades came, in England, in France, and all of those places, they were dying of the bubonic plague. Whereas in Spain, which was Cordova, where the Muslims were, and the Spanish Muslim Spain, they already had hard roads, and they also had plumbing. They already had, what's it called? They had lights, street lights. Are you getting what I'm saying? That's what was happening at that point. But when the Crusaders came and killed the Muslims, there were people amongst them who felt, wow, we are still having plague and all of this. But the Muslims had agriculture. Okay, let me tell you the story of coffee. You know, do you guys know the story of coffee? You know, coffee was in Yemen. In fact, there's a place in Yemen called Makkah. So the coffee beans. You understand? It was the Arab that developed the coffee. And then the British came and took it. And then you guys are now talking about coffee, and then you cannot speak anything without Starbucks and all of that. It's stolen. That's why that professor that I was telling you about said that the Westerners don't have anything. They just stole everything and call it their own. The way America is doing now. If I start to tell you the story of what America has done to Nigeria alone, you'll be very shocked. Anyway, so you now find out this situation where when these guys now went back, they were now like, we are still busy here dying of plague, while they have, you know, plumbing in their district. So they now started seeing what the Muslims did. And whereas they wiped out the Muslims, they now started to colonize the rest of the world, including Africa, and start suppressing them and stealing their resources and building their own people. So the difference between them and the Arabs was that wherever the Arabs went, they mixed with the people, became part of the people, allowed people also to take part in administration and work together. The Europeans don't do that. The Europeans will go, they will attack you, they will kill you, they will steal from you, and they will build. You get what I'm saying? Of course, part of whatever it is they do. So what you therefore would call civilization, I'm sure now you can ask to see that you have to ask yourself again, what truly is civilization? Then I end by speaking about politics. The truth of the matter is this: the divide and rule is politics. If I come to your house and you welcome me and I take over your house, are you going to be happy about it? If I want to keep dominating over your house, I have to find a way of doing it. Either kill all of you and then I take over. Sometimes that has happened. That's what America did to the Red Indians. That is what Spain did to the Latin Americans. That is what the British did to the Aborigines of Australia. That's what the British did to the Aborigines of New Zealand. But South Africa couldn't do that because that's the Germans came from Germany that took over South Africa. It needed the people there as slaves. They needed to use them to work. So they would kill some, but they left the majority. And over the years, they couldn't control them. And so they had to hand over. You get it? Then you're now able to understand what is happening in today's Israel. The Israelis are there, and they've always tried to get rid of the Palestinians. But the Palestinians are like, and they couldn't be back. Are you getting the point? So the Israelis are stuck. They thought they could control them. They kept them in Gaza. What you don't understand, Gaza that you see today, Gaza that you see today is not the Gaza that is there. Gaza extended all the way from where you saw, almost as far as southern Turkey. It was a very big, wide street. It's not a street, it was a really major town. It was a crossroad between the west and the east, and it was a trading center. What now happened was it shrunk over the years, And then when the Israelis took over Palestine, what they did was that all these countries, all these parts in today's Israel that you hear of, Haifa. Haifa is not Haifa. Haifa is Jaffa. You get what I'm saying? Tel Aviv, that they are calling Tel Aviv, it's not Tel Aviv. Forgetting the true Palestinian name. What they did, what Ben Gurion and his group did was that all this is documented. They took all those names for Palestinian names. They replaced them with Hebrew words that had a similarity to the sound of the Palestinian town, so that it makes it easy to be able to pronounce it. They wanted to wipe out the Palestinian culture. And so they replaced all those towns with Hebrew sounding names. When even their leaders, people like Ben Gurion, his name was not Ben Gurion. Golda Meir, that was not her name. Netanyahu, his name is something Yakubovich or Milosevic or something like that. So even their leaders, their original name is not what you are saying. They are Eastern European names. These are people who came from Eastern Europe. And by the time we will probably be discussing about the Jews, you will have had as a group of, there's an empire called the Khazari Empire. You guys today think that people are born Jews. There was a time when people actually converted to become Jews. There are still people who convert to be Jews, like, what's the name? Ivana Trump married that guy that she's married to. She became a Jew. You understand? There are very few people that still become Jews, but the Khazaris, who are the fundamental explanation for the Eastern European Jews, who are the majority of people who are in today's Israel, they don't have any link to the Middle East. And that's why it is forbidden in today's Israel to do genetic testing. Because when they do genetic testing, they will find out that genes have nothing to do with the Middle East. When they did genetic testing, they found that the genes of today's Palestinians is about 95 to 99% matching with that of the ancient people that were in the land of Palestine. Are you guys getting what I'm saying? So that's now where the politics come in. The politics come in from the point where you have a group of people who now have power, who now have opportunity. They go to another person's place, take over the place or take over their resources. And in order to maintain that control, they will devise means, part of which is the World Trade, part of which is the International Criminal Court, part of which is the International Court of Justice. But then they used to keep the word that they used to say the rule-based order, international justice system, until Israel came and exposed all of those things. Are you guys with me in all of this? So I think I'll stop at that for now, so that you can ask me questions. I probably will have missed out some things. But like I did say, it's an introductory, because even I am still studying. And unfortunately, the last 4 weeks have been quite rough for me. So some of my information is in my researches. So maybe when you ask me a question, I'll be able to remember. But there are so many sides that one would look. But I must say something. 2 things I want to bring up. I want you guys to understand . As I was trying to say, 2 things I want us to take away. this thing we call civilization, we need to be very circumspect to understand that it is not just one group of people. It's actually the history of evolution of human relationships. Second thing I also want to say is to remind you of the story of the hunter and the lion. In the battle between the hunter and the lion, there's nobody to tell the story of the lion. It's usually the lion and the hunter that tells the story. So when you keep this in mind, then you now start to learn to review information. And that's where the beauty of internet has come in. You don't need to go to America to the National Library of Congress. You don't need to go to anywhere. All you need is an Android phone and an internet access. And so many of the things I've told you are just but a scratch in it. And each day I learn new things every day. I hope I've been very useful and I'll be open to questions and comments. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. A big takbir for our brother. I want to ask that we all recite Surah Al-Kawthar for him. May Allah continue to deepen his knowledge, and may Allah continue to protect him and elongate his life. Bismillah inna atina. Bismillah inna atina Al-Kawthar. Thank you very much, my brother. Questions. We talked about a paradigm shift in some of the things we've heard, or the information us. You can see very well that it wasn't even what we know now. So for us to go back to what it is, like rightly said, his story, our story. And then I like that part of the story. Because you will never hear the lion story. We will always hear the story. Questions? And can we signify by raise of hands? I can see a lot of brothers are raising their hands already. No sisters question? Okay, let's start with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I have 5 brothers. So inshallah, I'm taking the questions one by one. Okay, so bismillah. Yes.
Doctor, thank you so much to learn. For my very first question, I have two, and I'll be very, very fast about them. You talk so much about inventions made by Muslims and the Arabs. And from what I've read too, like there was this book, 1,000 innovations by Muslims. Innovations by Muslims around the world. And I was so surprised that you said that. Let me say that without questions were what? I mean, some of those names that you mentioned, algorithm and.
Oh, okay.
And my question is, how did we Muslims or the Arab will do that thing? I don't want to use confusion now, because that's the new word in town. And going forward, could it be that because they just felt we have done enough and they went back to sleep? And all we hear today is new things and some other funny names. That's one. Second one. The Arab world are sleeping, and as in the Middle East, because almost all the world now around the world, it's either Yemen, it's either Syria, it's either Iraq or Iran. And whatever is happening in Gaza is because they are not too united. Where do we go from here? As in, how much of peace we do to ensure that the world is civilized at this point in time? Those are my 2 questions.
Well, a quick answer to all that you've said is that 2 sides, one from the Westerners and the other one from the Arabs, as you said. As at the point in time when the Westerners started rising, after the, what's it called, after the Crusade, after their exposure to Muslims, and they started to develop, you get what I'm saying? Their own philosophy was acquire capacity to colonize, acquire knowledge to take advantage. That was they had a predatory orientation. They kept rising. They were even coming to the Muslims and learning, but they were learning to use against the Muslims. On the Muslim side, the Muslims were depreciated. You understand? And then the second thing that Muslims had is that they didn't have a predatory tendency. They had a sharing tendency. Before they woke up to realize what was happening, the Westerners are taking over. So when the Westerners now took over, they had to now maintain their hegemony. And in order to do that, they had to they had to disconnect the Arabs and Muslims from their origin. They had to make them think that they were useless people, they were worthless people, they were people without a history. So, and like I said about the lion and the hunter, they rewrote history. So all this information that I'm giving to you now, information that just started coming out in the last 20, 30 years. So we didn't know. We only believed what we were told. Just like if a useless group of people. And another good example is like, what if I tell you, let's just look at America as an example. The whites in America did two things to the blacks. They used religion. Do you know that they altered what the Bible said? And they emphasized areas about slaves worshiping their masters. And they only made available those parts of Bible verses that slaves obey your masters. Are you getting it? And then they promised them heaven. So if somebody was punishing you on earth, and he now tells you that there's a place where you will enjoy in heaven, and to you to enjoy, just obey your master. Just like the Wahhabi are doing to rule America, to rule Saudi. They are the ones that will tell you, Atiullah, Atiur Rasul. You understand? So it's the same principle. Anybody who has position of authority doesn't want to lose it. So you have to find a way to maintain it. Now, I'll now conclude the Arab part in this, because it was a worry for me. But you see, what always happens to us as Muslims is that we assume when we speak about Islam, we assume Arab. But do you know that the role of the Arabs in Islam is probably the first 60 years, maximum 100 years? That's why when we were talking about the Rashidun Khalif, the first four, that's Abu Bakr, Umar, Usman, and Ali, and then the moment it became Muawiyah, when he now switched to monarchy, it started crashing. And then from the point in time when two things happened, when the caliphate in Spain came, you get what I'm saying? It was no longer the Arabs. That's number one. Then number two, when the Usmanis took over, these were what? The Turks. Are you getting the point? So the Turks took over. They were no longer Arabs. Even though there were Arabs with them, there were Persian Muslims with them, there were Uzbek Muslims with them, there were Mongolian Muslims with them, there were black Muslims with them. They took over. And they started to rule from around that 1,100 or something till 1917, when they lost and Britain took over Palestine, France took over some part of the Levant and all of that, and Italians took over whatever they did. The question is, what happened? You see, what really happened was that apparently the Arabs started to generate what they call Arabism. They were no longer thinking as Muslims. They were thinking as Arabs. And the British are very good at divide and conquer. So the British now came to them because the British and the French, they had met at the site Pico. They had planned, they saw that the power of the Turks, what's the name of that what they call it? Or the Ottomans, they had started weakening. They had their own problems too. But the Ottomans have started coming down. But they could have resisted the British and the Westerners but they made two mistakes. Mistake one was when they fought the First World War, they fought on the part of the Germans. You get what I'm saying? And the second mistake was that they were not paying attention to the Arabs. The British could not have won, but what the British did, they went to the Arabs and started telling them about nationalism, started telling them about Arabism. So the Arabs now turned against the Ottomans. They were no longer talking Islam, they were talking Arabism. And that was the beginning of the end for them. So the only way they can come back, you will now see why, with all the massacre going on in Palestine, Egypt is there watching, Saudi there is watching, UAE is there watching, because they are not thinking as Muslims. They are now thinking as, initially they were thinking as Arabs, but they are mostly thinking about UAE, Lawa, Bahrain, war, Saudi, war. To the extent that maybe for 8 years, Saudi was bombing Yemen. Does that make sense to you now? So whereas the Westerners were doing all they were doing to destroy, he removed Islam from, created nationalism for them, and even despite them, because he had a plan to suppress them, he continued to suppress them. And then all these Boko Haram that came to us, all these, what's the name, Al Qaeda and all of that, they're all from the. So it created a lot of division amongst the Arabs, and that's why they are the way they are. Do I make sense to you?
Mine, I would want a continuation of this section some other time. And for two, I said I would like a continuation of this section for some reasons. Number two, I want to say a very big thank you to the speaker, to the lecturer. It made me have a fresh perspective of history, especially as regards the dichotomy between the labeling of the Jews and Egypt. I never for once, even though we've all read these stories over and over and over, it never occurred to me for once that at a point in time, Jews were actually welcomed in Egypt. Where the history clock usually starts from is where they became enslaved in Egypt. And that is for a reason. To paint the Egyptians, or quote and unquote now, the Muslims, even though the Egyptians of old were not Muslims, to paint the Muslims in bad light in the Western media. That's number one. That's number two. My number three is more of a contribution in the sense that it is easy for us to have these manipulations of history because of the divisions that have been flattened within the Muslim world. It is something very important, and I think it's a salient point that in the golden years of Islam, it is instructive to note that the Arabs or the Arab Muslims were not Jews. They were basically the Persians or the Altomoriwas, the Macedonians, the Albanians, the Africans at a point in time that gave what Islam is, the identity we all know Islam to be, as a world conqueror today. It wasn't really the Arabs. And then between, I think, 1450 or 1750, there was something very important that happened in the Muslim world. And that was the creation of the Safavid Empire, ruled by the Persians. Now, that came up for some political reasons. And unfortunately, the West took advantage of that, and they began to drum it into our ears, and they began to manipulate knowledge, and they began to manipulate publications, such that for the benefit of people. And that is where the problem of Islam, as we know, such that if you now want to begin to talk about religious and all of those, the very first that will come to the forefront is to listen to the Shias. The Shias, we are the Sunnis and all of those. But for those people, it is a bad, and that's what Mike organized. We are now on the menu. We are now on the menu. What that is easy for the personal to eat or international policy, Dr. Salis, I would want us to probably have another section where you talk about the
A quick response is that the first thing I think we will benefit from is we must learn to separate Islam from Arabs. And you were totally right. And I did say it. I said the value of the Arabs to Islam was the first 60 years, maximum 100 years. Once you recognize that, you have, like they used to say in medicine, you know that person with crazy, the day he knows they crazy, 50% of his problem is solved. But Christmas, we don't know say crazy. Wallah, it never starts. I'm sure you know that. They call it insight. Muslims don't have insight. Well, I try to create that. So the moment we know that Islam is not Arabia, look at the simplest problem of moon sighting. Till today, you get what I'm saying? The Saudis tell lies. Is it somebody that is calling Kadidi to come and do what's it called? Come and do concert? Is the person they are taking as a serious man? Somebody that cut a Muslim into pieces and burns him in an embassy. Is that person you are taking seriously as the Hadimul Haramain? I mean, it's just very funny. But not to waste our time, first we must recognize Islam is Islam. Islam is not Arab. Do you get what I'm saying? Then number two is just for me, I'm actually trying to figure out if we're going to continue, what should be the next one. So he is suggesting that the next one should be division in the Muslim world. It may be, it may not be. Like in my own community, you know, in Lasut, after Zuhr, we have a habit. There will be a 10-15 minute talk, and it can be on anything. So when the battle started between the Israelis and the, it's not even a battle, when the massacre started, you know, a number of times we were speaking in that matter. I think that we need to speak about the Jews, starting from the very beginning up until now. It will explain many things, because even this Muslim division you are talking about, it has a lot to do with the Jews. And I will only say one thing to you, that I recognize and admire the Jews for one thing. They are very hardworking. And anybody who denies that, you are being very foolish. They are very, these are people, they're no more than 15 million. And they can stop, not even just the Arabs which are 100 million. Even America is under them. Do you know when this guy went to White House? What's his name? Netanyahu. He wanted to sit down. It was Trump that was pulling chair for him. Or you didn't see that video? When he wanted to sit down in White House, it was Trump over chair. So what are you talking about? How can 15 million people have that kind of power? So they worked hard. And I remember in GSS Ilorin, the motto of GSS Ilorin is "Man Jeddah wa Jeddah." He who strives, achieve. And people, you work hard. So give it to them. When they created the state of Israel, do you know what they did? Do you know what they did? They killed even their own people. Just like they did in October 7th. They can do anything to achieve their goals. You have to recognize that fact. Give them their laurels. They have worked hard. How will you talk now? They went to the Arab world, where it was the Arabs that welcomed the Jews when the Europeans were killing them. For 1,000 or 2,000 years, there is no country in Europe that has never chased away the Jews. Are you aware of that? Mention any country in Europe. In fact, the same Ukraine you are talking about, it was the Ukrainians that were exposing the Jew one, and the Europeans and the Ukrainians that time massacred Jews. But the Israelis don't have any problem. If they need you, they don't look at what you have done in the past. They will toast you until you do what they want to do, and then they will kill you. We need to understand how far the Jews have gone. So I actually think we need to speak about them. I don't know whether it is the next one or the next one after that, but it's something we need to sit down. When you understand how the Jews came to where they are today, maybe to explain so many things. When the Arab Jews, the Israeli Jews, do you know that it was what they call them now, Shimbet? I mean, what they call their people. Do you know that they went and they were actually killing their own people? And they were putting the blame on the Arabs so that those Arab Jews can run away and come to, come to Israel. Now, people like Abi Schleim, who is an Arab Jew in Iraq, are now exposing all of these things. So it's a story that, I'm still studying that part so that I will not tell any lies, I will not misrepresent anything. And what has made it so good is that, do you know that the greatest source of information about the Jews and the atrocities, do you know where it's coming from? Jews like themselves. People like, what's the Noam Chomsky, people like Norman Finkelstein, people like Avi Schleim, even Benny Morris, who is now telling lies. He was one of the people that wrote all of those stories. So these are Jews themselves that are telling this story. And the greatest mistake that the Israeli state did was that, just like Americans used to do, after like 30 years or 40 years, they declassify some of their documents. And they never anticipated people like, what's his name, Avi Schleim, and there's this other very powerful guy who went and read those books and they were shocked. For example, those three wars that you people are being told, 1948 war, 1967 war, 1973 war, that the Israelis are so powerful. It's not true. It was rigged. In fact, particularly like that 73 war, the Arabs had overrun Israel. The Israelis ran to the Americans. And then, unfortunately, because Arabs were fighting as Arabs, they were not fighting as Muslims. So the Americans now went and met the Arabs and said, let us do pause, let us do ceasefire. And then in that one month when they were doing that, they now gave weapons to the Israelis. The Israelis now invaded and wiped out the Arabs. Just like it happened in this one too, the ceasefire that they happened in November. Why did they do ceasefire with Lebanese and do initial ceasefire with Palestinians? The soldiers were tired. You understand? They only gave them time to recoup so that they can go and attack again. So it's painful. I'll be honest with you. There are some days I don't study because I'm sad. Some days I'm just crying because it's very bad, very, 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 very bad story. But so I know we need to speak about the Jews. I don't know at what point in time that will happen. I also know we need to speak about the division amongst the Muslims. But you see, when you talk about the division about the Muslims, it's really the Arabs. Arabs they want to hear that. And Al-Arabu ashadu min al-kufur wa nifaq. It's the Quran. The Arabs are the toughest when it comes to disbelief and hypocrisy. If you want to see Babanla Munafiki, in Cairo, there's a poster. Welcome to Egypt. Call it Misr. Where whoever you are, there's somebody more than that. It is in Cairo, you will see somebody with big turban in Ramadan. And what is Arabs if not the Egyptians? They are the largest, they are the biggest, they are the, do you get what I'm saying? But you see, again, people don't understand. I also told you about the origin of Arabs. It's not Egyptian, it's not Moroccan, it's not Algerian, it's not Libyan. What's the origin of the Arabs? And what are the true Arabs in Yemen doing today? So it's not the way you look at it at all, but may Allah guide us and help us.
Yeah, thank you so much. People like you are so lucky. The people like you are so lucky to have met scholars. Today, scholars are fighting over useless things, and by the time I started sitting down with Dr. Olukade, it's late, but you are very lucky. You dine together, you wine together. So going back to my question, you said Musa never entered the promised land. And in fact, when Senior Netanyahu told, when there was a Doha meeting Then I think it's in 2012 or 2011 when they're going for a Doha meeting. The senior Netanyahu, his father, told Netanyahu that, look, it's an historian. Said that land belongs to God. Don't give away Israel. Just like Nehru told Indians, don't give away the Kashmir. Belongs to my father, belongs to my grandfather. So now Quran says, Musa told his people, enter that land that Allah has ordained for you. And they said, like you said, they are so weak. And they said, no, in that land, there are people there, they are formidable, they are powerful, we can't go in there. So if Allah can take away all their power, we will enter. But two praise among them, this is in Quran 5, Surah Al-Ma'idah, verse 21 to 24. That's their step. And as Musa now said, enter until two praise among them. Now said, let us enter. Perhaps we will conquer them. But they said no. Until Musa now pray, oh Allah, it's only me and Harun now that have the power. But now, which story? How couple that did not enter? But in the Quran, it was also not mentioned that they really entered that promised land. It wasn't in that verse. So now I've read this particular verse came to my mind whenever I heard the issue of Palestine and Israel. And when Netanyahu said that this land belongs to them, ordained by God to them, you understand? And these verses come to my mind. This issue is why though. So how do you correlate that your story? So what really happened?
You know, it's very interesting. The first thing I will ask you to do is go and watch the video of Ahmadida on that question. You'll be shocked. Truly, Allah did say they should enter the land. And truly, Allah did say that He will give the land to them. But it's like, you know, this verse in the Quran that says, Fawailu lil Musallin. Do you know the meaning of that verse? Eh? I want one of the sisters to tell me, Fawailu lil Musallin. Woe unto those who pray. Why are you guys praying? Allah, okay, before we don't kill. I think it's time for Zul. Will you guys bother to go and praise you? I need lots of my kírun now. Oh, you haven't had Christian evangelists saying that to Muslims. So what would be your response? It's a verse in the Quran. Oh, lots of people for Muslim. So can anybody defend that? Sorry? Context people. So why did it take you 5 minutes to be able to answer the question? Something this simple, even your regular daily life. I'm sure all of you are looking at what you need to precise to basically. Is that not what was going through your mind? So you can see for something that's simple, you are difficult. That is not a verse that stops at Fawailu lil Musallin. It is a statement that continues. Alladina hum, those who pray, but who did what? Alladina hum, Yuraun, Wayamna. So he's saying those who pray, but did this 1, 2, 3. Why are you bothering? What happened to Bawen? To have a shield or a gelede? But to have gelede, they want to avoid the letter of the shield. A gelede, no way. Baulede in the first place. Or I don't know to have the letter shield. I don't know whether you guys get it. It's the same thing. It is true. Allah did tell Musa and his people to enter into Canaan. But unfortunately, I will have to go and cram and memorize that verse. You see, it did not end. What he was saying in summary was that you will enter into that land. The land will be yours for as long as You run it according to my laws. I don't know whether you get it. So it becomes like the land is for you. But if you now know, say, which means that you go into the land to do 1, 2, 3. If you don't do 1, 2, 3, the land is not yours. Do you understand? Am I making sense? That is really the truth. Just as, for example, you guys ask me a question and say, so what is the solution to Palestine? Did that also answer that question? So should it just now be the Muslims? Then what happens to the Arab Christians in Palestine? And then what happens to the Jews that always been in Palestine even before all this war started? Do you know the answer? Palestine is for everybody. Palestine is a holy land. And so anybody can come there. And you ask me, how can I say that? When Umar, Anhu, when he went to collect the key to Palestine, remember what happened? The Pope, or whoever was the head of the Christians, who was giving the key to Umar, gave him the honor. It was time for prayer. And he now told him to come and pray in the Church of the Sepulchre, which was the highest, it was Christians that were ruling then. Even though you guys have not told you the story of how the Church of the Sepulchre came. The Church of the Sepulchre is the Christian holiest place. Before the Church of the Sepulchre was what? For the Jews. It was the temple. And because the temple has been destroyed, what was left of the temple is the western wall. But if supposing I tell you that there's a United Nations edict that actually says that the western wall belongs to the Muslims, what would you say to that? Nobody's speaking to that. But I will just take you back and say, when the Pope now told Umar, it's time for prayer, come and pray in the Church of the Sepulchre. You know what Umar told him? He said, I will not pray there. If I pray here, my people will come after me and turn it into a mosque. Are you aware of that? So what did he now do? He now walked 400 meters away and went to pray. Till today, he became Masjid al-Umar. Are you getting what I'm saying? He became what? Masjid al-Umar. And the next thing he did after he finished praying, he now asked, he said, where is the Temple Mount? That is the holy place of the Jews. The Christians just laughed. He said, "Kilo, sorry. At the wife out, but yes, the Jew go on in Jerusalem. How can you do that? Show me where it is." They took Umar to where it was. What did they see there? It was a dome. Olusosun site, which is here. It was a dome that has been gathered over 400 years. What did Umar do? He went on the ground and started clearing. What did the Muslim army do? The Muslim army went on their knees and started clearing that Temple Mount. So he resuscitated the holy place of the Jews. The next thing he now did is that he now said, I want you to find me 80 Jewish families. That's how he established the Jews in Jerusalem. So Jerusalem is not meant for any one group of people. But the only difference is that it has to be administered by who? Muslims. You know why? It is only Muslims that recognize Christians. It is only Muslims that recognize Jews. The Jews don't recognize the Christians. The Christians don't recognize the Jews. Let me now shock you. The key to the Holy Sepulchre, the most important holy place for Christianity. Do you know who has the key? The Muslim family. So go ahead. And the Christians amongst themselves won't agree. Because you see, they are the Eastern Jews. And the Eastern Jews are divided into 6 or different groups. So the particular group that is the major one running the sepulchre are the Assyrian Jews. Are you getting what I'm saying? So one back other Eastern Jews, they didn't want them back Roman Jews. So they now agreed amongst themselves, so they only agreed that the only person that can keep it are the Muslims. That's their own church, the key to their own church. At that point. Do you get the point? So have I been able to address? Yeah. Next question.
Alhamdulillah, you touched on what I wanted to ask, but like our brother said, if there's an opportunity, Zionism and Judaism, very, very important.
It's very easy,
I know,
but it will come up when Judaism is being discussed, when the Jews are being discussed.
Because Nigerian Christians, unfortunately, I don't know if they don't watch videos. Countless videos where it's been proven that even an average doesn't believe in Jesus Christ or Christianity or anything. But we go to social media, and especially I try for our children, those who are Christian friends or who are single, from that background. The Christians kind of have empathy or the disbelief. You understand with what is happening in Gaza and Palestine. Why it pains us that children are being killed in their thousands? Why it pains us that women and the aged people are being killed as against military rules for time? The Christians in Nigeria are happy like the massacre is going on, genocide is going on. And I kind of wonder, these people, they know the Muslims, they want to break the Islamic world, let me put it that way. But they are coming for you. You are like a nobody to them. I always tell my friends who are Christians that, look, they just want your sympathy. Get what they want. So by the time you want them, which has been doing for many years, to come back to you, they won't do anything and all that. Like I said, you answer some of my questions. I'll just be brief. Over time, Germany to everywhere, people are chased all over the world. That. The Jews. And you can't really say these are the original Israelites in the present world. Some people are just using Zionism, to push their own agenda, and the Jewish people who believe in Judaism themselves, I believe they don't recognize Christianity. Yes, they could give Islam some respect because they know in their Torah, they were mentioned of things that have come to pass. Yes, they might not believe in Rasulullah, they might still be waiting for the Rasul, as far as we know, but I want you to talk about this. Zionism, Judaism, vis-a-vis, what Nigerians always think about what is happening in Palestine.
The first thing I would say, within a week or two after the battle started, it seems as if you've forgotten the GO of the Redeemed Christian Church. What's it? Adeboye. Pastor Adeboye. You've forgotten the 1.5 minute prayer he made for the Jews, praying that God should help them to destroy the Palestinians. Does anybody remember that anymore? As if it never happened. Imagine if a Muslim, any Muslim, not because of a Muslim leader, not because of a Muslim leader of the caliber of Pastor Adeboye, to make that kind of a statement. What do you think Nigeria will do? Nobody's speaking about it anymore. So when you are talking about the Christians not knowing about what the Jews are doing, I'm just looking at you and I'm laughing. You and I know how Nigeria's Christians are. You understand? Majority of the Christians is Seminal Atana. We hear and we follow. How many Christians actually read the Bible? And when they read the Bible, they don't go beyond John 3:16 and those few verses. Most of what the Christians read is what their pastors, the books that their pastor writes, and the daily motivational. Do you understand? They don't sit to read the Bible. When they sit to read the Bible, what happens? They become what's the name of that guy, that professor? What's his name? That has left Christianity now. That is the toughest problem of Christianity. That guy is terrible for Christianity. You know, he started out as an evangelical Christian, and because he wanted to become more Christian, he now decided to go and study university, to do his BA, to do his PhD, MSc, and everything. And the more he started to study, the more he said, late. You understand? He left Christianity. And now when he tells you story of Christianity, the other alternative would be something like, what's that mathematician that became Muslim? So anybody who learns about Christianity seriously will either become an agnostic or become a Muslim. It's very simple. What does Adeboye know about what the Bible says? What does he know? The third part you will tend to see are those who maybe they didn't know at the beginning, but they now find out, but they have gone too far in Christianity. And okay, it's only now that Muslims have started employing imams and giving them houses, you know, sometimes even giving them car. If you are now, like for example, if you are imam of Lemu, so if they are going to sack the imam of Lemu, you know that Imam Lemu Mashora, because maybe ordinarily one full label, one full motto, one salary. Now, do you think Imam Lemu, supposing the administrators of Lemu, they now start dictating to him what he can say and not say? You think he can easily go against them? But here with Muslims, because most of the time the imams are just doing their own job. In fact, while I'm not imam, it's my own community now. My own community now telling me they don't want me to be their imam anymore. Èmi gan ìyá mo jẹ tí mo ṣe imam because every Zoom wọ́n ti tò síbẹ̀ èyí tó máa sọ imam àwọn ọmọ yóò ti jẹun, imam àwọn ọmọ yóò ti lówó school, imam àwọn ọmọ yóò ní tí ní bag. In fact, àwọn tó lówó díẹ̀ ní community wa tó bá ti di Zoom báyìí tó bá ti rí ni wọ́n máa bá lọ because máa gbowó lọ́wọ́ wọn ẹ̀dá máa fún lówó. Do you understand what I'm saying? So yes, that is the first problem, that Christians, as far as understanding their religion is concerned, it's not how the average Muslim understands Islam. The Muslims' understanding of the Christians' understanding of Christianity very low. The Christians that have understanding of Christianity and are still Christian, it is that other extreme what they will lose. That's why you hardly find any Christian who has gone very far to just walk away for easy thing. It's a source of income. Do you get what I'm saying? So that's number one. Then number two, I spoke to you that since Adeboye did what he did, I said what he said, have we ever seen it in the media anymore? Imagine if a Muslim had done that. You will see it 30 times a day in the news. Do you think it's coincidence? Now, the equivalent of that, which is what the Israelis have been doing to the world, what they call hasbara. Have you ever heard of that word? Write it down and Google it. You know, hasbara in summary is the story that the Israelis want you to hear of anything. If they don't want you to hear, and if they want you to hear, you only hear as they want you to hear it. To the extent that they even did, you now know about ChatGPT, and you've heard about Lily J, and you've heard about Rose's Corner. So I'm asking a question about ChatGPT, AI, too, and so I'm asking to Ashiri. Do you know that the Israelis went as far as to create their own AI machine, which they tweak, so that it will only be speaking the Israeli narrative? But you know the way Allah does. They now release the AI. You understand? And then people started asking questions. And you know, computer is only 1 and 0. By the time people now started asking questions about Israel and the Palestinians, AI now started saying that Israelis are colonialists. They are doing ethnic cleansing. Once they withdraw it. So the power of misinformation. If I also take you back, you say the Israelis are more advanced as far as misinformation, more than the Nazis were. If you remember Eric Goebbels, you know, when he spoke that time when the Nazis were killing the Jews and destroying the Jews, they asked him, how come you are able to keep telling lies? He said, look, if you lie long enough and often enough, people will accept it to be what? To be the truth. So that's just the why things are the way that you see. If someone telling you the story, you saw how I, without looking, I told you I was very Simon Levi Judah. Oh my God, I was 6 years old. You know, think that only you but take it to calling Creole me for. So part of what we need to do as Muslims is that we must create our own cultural system. You get what I'm saying? Mustafa made a statement and said, somebody like me, I'm lucky. And this one, I think everybody should listen to this. You see, when I was in university, we had this problem. Those of us who became the leaders of the MSS and made MSS what has transformed Muslims in Nigeria to what it is today, we were not IRK students. We're engineering, medicine, and all of those very high-sounding disciplines. Do you know the people that gave us problems? IRK students. They were what you call establishment people. And that's also why when you see all these market people, all these Aladabi people, all those Jalat, are you getting what I'm saying? So the problem is that there's a way the people who are the institutional people, what a man think, what a poor one. And those of us who are the engineering, medicine people, were rational oriented. You have to explain. You understand? Olukade was my mentor, yes. If I'm in a meeting that Olukade is chairing, if I don't speak, Olukade knows that I don't agree. So he will take a pause and call me aside, Muhammad Kiloshel. But if he's talking and I'm adding, knows there's no problem. But I will never speak against him in public. But once I'm not saying anything, he will take a pause and call me aside. I will say my own. I will not say against him, but I will say my own. This man allowed me to flourish. I met him when I was in Form 1, was in 100 level in university. And that's how we went on like that. So by the time I came into 100 level, it was year 5. And we just became like that. People thought I was a junior brother. And quite a lot of us like that he brought up. So we had the opportunity, you know, children when they're very young, if the path you teach them, look at it, taught us how to think. But those people who went to all these madrasas where all they teach them is to cram and how to take money out of people. Toba Lodi, Wasi, and Toba Shedeni ceremony. How do you expect them to change? They don't know any other way. Unless Allah gives them that opportunity, excuse me, gives them that opportunity to meet a different set of people who can change their orientation. I don't know any other way. As you're looking at me like this, I'm tougher than you think. Those who know will tell you. But I look so harmless. I'm here gisting and laughing with you. Go and ask those who have met me. But it is not me. It's not my fault. The person that brought me up to fear nobody except what? But if you were brought up to be afraid of the next cockroach, will you be able to face a local government chairman? Not to talk of the president. I don't know whether you follow what I'm saying. I have been taught to respect everybody, but fear nobody. Because you cannot have knowledge or wisdom greater than Allah and His Quran. So, kí ló fẹ́ sọ fún mi? Do you understand? So, even àwọn Tamambawi, all these are brothers, we shouldn't fight them. We should just find a way to make them see things the other way. And then it will get better. To get the point here. Sorry.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. A big eye-opener. The question and answer was even more deep. It was deeper than his lecture itself. Alhamdulillah. Jazakumullah khairan to everybody seated here and those of us online. Thank you so much. May Allah continue to strengthen us all. Micah meets twice every month on this floor, first and third Sundays. Inshallah, on the 20th of April, we would think of, because there's pressure to bring Dr. Salisu back. If he's ready, I'm ready to bring him back. If he's free on that day, because again, he's a very busy person. He's extremely very busy. Before I could pin him down for this lecture, we've been on it since January, right? After the Katibawa one. And sincerely, it was worth the while. Jazakumullah khairan, sir. Thank you so much. So, after that, we're going to also advise us and join all of us to please follow us on our social media handles, Micah Nigeria, at Instagram, on TikTok, on Facebook, Micah Nigeria. Please follow us, like, and share. The only reason why our videos will flourish on some of these social media handles is when we take active part in them. Thank you very much. We appreciate you once again. On behalf of the Amir, my ES, and the entire crew, say Jazakumullah khairan to all of us. Inshallah, our social media handles will tell us the next person we're bringing on this floor on the 20th of April. If it is still Dr. Salisu, you will know, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Please let's go for Salah. The sisters, we have a ablution center there. The brothers, the ablution center is after the courtyard. Very much.